I just clicked live, so you're already on.
Nice. Want to know a funny thing?
Yeah.
Somebody, funeral potatoes.
Yeah, the post that I made is a MormonSlop.
Okay. All right. I catch shit for this, but it's the Mormon in my veins. I love anything that's put into a casserole form.
Really?
I love funeral potatoes more than anything. They're so good.
I'm an Irish guy who's allergic to potatoes.
What the hell?
Yeah, I don't know how
That's one of the biggest tragedies ever.
Yeah. I like the taste of them and stuff, but yep, I'm for sure allergic.
Oh, that blows.
Yeah.
So I was noticing after spending way too much time staring at John Delin's face today, and somebody pointed this out to me as well, independently of this thought. I got real close up on his face, and I was like, you know what? His hair looks a lot blacker than it usually does. It looks like there's this great episode of The Office where Creed thinks he's going to get phased out for being too old. So he runs into the back room and puts a bunch of printer toner in his hair. It just looks disgustingly black.
So I'm going to show your video as soon as more people kind of bubble in, but is it obvious that it's
I don't know. It's probably less obvious when you didn't, because I had to stare at his face a lot today. But some other dude that I showed that video to just he noticed it right away. So I don't know.
Yeah, so Jacob's already reshared it, and
yeah, I saw that.
It's gonna go viral, man. Viral in our neck of the woods, like 600-700 viral.
Whoa.
Let's see here. So yeah, I just put up. There was more talk about the slop stuff, Slopgate. Slopgate
what the hell is, like, why is that where they're choosing to plant their fucking flag?
There's so much to go over today, but if we wanted to cover it, Distributors talked about it a little bit last night, and he kind of summed it up as you need to go back to a traditional sit-down meal where everything's separated and separate, and the Americas is all about the hodgepodge, and the Europeans all about keeping the things separate, and it's this bigger, wider idea and concept of societies, and melting pots or not, it's just dragging everything into it. But I was just sitting there thinking, I didn't necessarily want to get into it, but is funeral potatoes, is Mormon slop, is it Utah slop, or is it Mormon slop?
I don't know. It might be more Utah slop. I feel like when I talk to Utah Mormons, I got like the light version of whatever they got. So maybe I got a small enough amount of casseroles that I didn't get sick of them.
My parents made funeral potatoes almost every week. I mean, my family liked them well enough.
I didn't have them every week.
It was one of my family's mainstays, and that was always tough for me. But
ours was enchilada casserole.
Well, I think we did that too, and then the meatloaf, and then, it was like a rotation. It wasn't exactly a 1 week rotation, but it wasn't much more than 10. And that was one of them on our rotation, which I couldn't keep eating. I actually tested, like I had like the back scratch test when I was a kid for potatoes, and then I tried them again when I was older, because potatoes, as the whatever bodybuilder I claim to be, is something I could eat if it was something on my menu, and I wish I could, because it would be such a good way to mix stuff up, and I can't. I
take it tragic, man.
Yeah, it's not like allergic, like I'm going to the hospital. It's just really don't feel good afterwards, and it's obvious in this media, and in the world of bodybuilding is where I found out it's 100% true, because I'm probably one of the only persons who gets down to controlling, knowing exactly what I've eaten for 2 straight months, And then when I put those potatoes in, all of a sudden, for the first time in 2 straight months, I it doesn't sit with me. So it really is, and I wish it wasn't.
I didn't realize how difficult it is for people to keep track of what they eat until. Did you ever see that? I can't remember the name. It's like some British. There's a lot of British shows about fat people.
Yeah,
and they're all kind of mean.
I used to watch them with that lady, and I really watched those. But just recently, the Lower Theaters covered one of those guys who'd go around calling him like "Tubby Tubby, you Tubby Tubby." Did you see them covering that one?
No.
Yeah, I watched the one with the ladies. I think it was called "You Are What You Eat." But
see, this one was they ask you to estimate what you eat in a day. And it's like, I can't lose weight. I don't know why.
Oh, I've seen that one.
I control calories really well. I probably eat 700 calories a day. And then they follow them around. They have secret cameras.
They have a friend who is thin. And they is that the same episode?
So I think you're thinking of a super fat versus super thin. That's the one where they swap meals for a day.
No. There was one where they actually had a way to test it, and all it was is like, yeah, this little girl here claims that she eats way more than I eat, and I eat way less than she eats, and all they did was follow them around and find out like, nope, that's not true.
No, every morbidly obese person in denial has one friend who is like, we just have different body types. I could eat her under the table, and I'm skinny. Like, no, you don't. Like, maybe you could win an eating contest, but then it's always you're constantly snacking. It's like they only count their meals. No, this one they have like hidden cameras and people follow them. Like they'll follow them in cars and go through the drive-thru and say, I want the same thing that last guy got. They'll just give him the same thing, and so they'll like 3 triple cheeseburgers or whatever, and they're like, actually, you were eating like 2,200 calories in a meal. You're like, I had no idea.
Yeah, they're lying to themselves. I'm trying to find this one where they covered one of the guys, and they said that the guys actually held to it. Like 10 years later, he's like, yeah, I don't care. Yeah, I made that show. What? Shut up. And that was really refreshing and rare for him, because usually somebody like that is saying like, I apologize. I apologize. Here it is. You there, Flip?
I'm trying to be. No more doom and gloom. Fun time. I demand fun in my life, Harry. Throw the knife away for now. All right, we're going to have some fun. All right, 2000s TV. Now, do you remember the 2000s? Oh, yeah. I don't really. I was like 3. But I was also very young, but I pretend like I remember them very well. But 2010, now there we are. I'm 13. I know what's going on. I'm watching TV because what else do I have to do? You're 13. And I didn't really realize how weird a lot of the old TV shows were, particularly the ones around vanity, about being too fat, too skinny, or too ugly. Because I don't watch TV anymore. Yeah, there were those shows where it would be like, you're hideous, let me make you beautiful. Sort yourself out, you ugly fat bastard.
So here's some clips from it.
Yeah, cool. Go check that out. Anyway, but the thing I want to talk about is this chap in particular. And as you can see, this is the best of British comedy. Now, this is a TV show that was called Fat Families. And Fat Families was rather brutal. It was put out on air in 2010. And I remember that era being very much obsessed with the rising obesity rate in the UK, and everyone being like, man, we should do something about it. And for some reason...
it is genuinely a worry that we need to take care of.
Yeah, it was, a fair point. But for some reason, the media industry in the UK decided to make like reality TV out of it. And when... but I'm a fan.
Two right massive fatty siblings who are at the peak of their porkiness. I'm going to be meeting some right beach blubber bellies. I'm in Luton, Bedfordshire, and about to meet 3 right jelly-bellied jumbos. I'm in London town, the nation's capital, home to Big Ben, Houses of Parliament, the London Eye, and 4 gigantic girls. These girls have got backstage passes to Porkyville. These fatties haven't seen their feet for years. I'm about to meet a family of Essex fatties. I'm about to meet a right pair pair of podgy parents. I used to be a fatty myself, but Mr. and Mrs. Massive Fatty. About to meet a colossal couple. That's if they can get off their backsides long enough to answer the door. These parents' kids are on a one-way road to Fatsville. No wonder he's such a massive fatty. I'm about to meet a right portly pair and about to meet two right bouncing brummies. I'm about to meet a right pair of wobblers whose weight's completely out of control. Watch out, massive fatties. The lard police are in town. Too much time sat on their fat bums. That's their problem. That woman is so fat she can't even walk around the shop. She's actually trapped in a body of lard. If they don't pull out their chubby fingers, they'll be on the way to an early grave. I've told these lazy lardies what I think. It's time for these guys to start pulling their chubby fingers out. They haven't got a clue what they're shoveling in their cake hole. Kaylee really is on the slippery slope to becoming a massive fatty. Britain is becoming a nation of fatties. I know the truth hurts, but it's the only way I'm going to get these two off their fat backsides. Well,
that just keeps going, man. Yeah, the one I used to watch was called, I think it was called You Are What You Eat. And I watched like actual episodes of that one. It's a lady.
Is my mic working? Okay.
Yeah.
Wasn't working before.
This lady.
Jesus.
Did you ever? But she's just as mean as that other one. I don't know if it'll show it here fast enough, but she's
with butter and jam, 6 slices of garlic butter bread, 2 cheddar cheese sandwiches, 2 chicken fajitas, a Chinese takeaway, an Indian takeaway with chicken korma, 6 turkey burgers, and 9 bags of crisps.
So they'd put out the food in front of them of what they eat in a week on one table, and they'd have to like, they had a...
What's on the tombstone, please?
Don't think I can.
It says, "Rest in peace, death by chocolate."
Yeah, those shows, man, they're over the top.
I'm gonna watch the shit out of that show. I watched one documentary that was called Too Fat to Work. It was a British one. It wasn't like as mean as those ones. It's just funny, the people's mindset, because this lady's like talking about how she gets benefits, and she's complaining that she got to choose between either having a state-funded car or a state-funded rascal scooter. And she chose the car, but now I can't get around in my house because I'm too large in it, and people are complaining about me being on benefits, but I've paid into the system, and unfortunately, I've fallen ill. You've fallen ill? No, you're enormous.
Yeah. That show is wild. I used to like watching The Biggest Loser too. Although I totally disagree with the way that they would go about training them 100%. But
what did they do? I never watched it.
They just overkill it on the very first day, and I'm just 100%. Like, I'm 100%. If somebody's gonna start working out with me, like, anybody could start working out with me. Anybody could, because I'm not gonna come in and be like, "Come on, you gotta do this." It's always just, here, you just go to the amount where you're leaning against what's comfortable for you. I'll go to the amount where I'm leaning against what's comfortable for me, and we'll do the same things, and that's it. And let's get out of here, you know. And all you got to do is lean. You don't need to kill yourself. You just need to lean into what's uncomfortable for you, and be consistent. That's it. You don't need to come in and act like you did the crazy, super hardcorest, wildest thing in the world, and that almost always gets people to leave or get too sore or get crazy. And the only reason it worked for them is because they were basically in a boot camp where they have no choice but to stay.
But well, wait, where do the antioxidants come in?
Oh yes, you got to get those from. You got to eat blueberries.
I remember these guys on my mission that were trying to get really big into working out, and they went and spent the night at our apartment for a zone conference. There were several of them, and they all wake up and like, "Oh yeah, we need our fucking creatine," and they like jump up and start making these protein shakes. And I was like, I don't know much about these things, but are they really going to be that helpful if you're not working out? And they're like, shut up. Because they didn't do their workout. They just drank the shit.
It's like Cartman. It's like what, the second or third episode of South Park, Weight Gain 4000, where Cartman just starts taking weight gain supplements and nothing else.
The supplement world is full of crap, man, and you don't need them. But
guess who's in town this week?
Who's that?
doTERRA.
Oh, yay!
And guess how many of the
you-
doTERRA, like, what just cracks me up is like, I sell wine, and boy, do we have a lot of extra customers this week because they're all about healthy
You mean
living.
the blueberry drink doesn't do enough for them, or whatever it is. Or the acai drink, acai.
No, the other thing that's so funny is how many of them come in and they just want the sweetest wine they can find.
Yeah. Flip, do you like funeral potatoes? We were talking. I put up slop as the picture. It's not really on topic, except everything we're talking about is Mormon slop. But that's still just harkening back to Mexican slop and slop
Mexican
gate
slop
stuff.
thing.
Yeah.
Funeral potatoes can be transcendently good, like any of the simple foods. Like, I mean, that's how I feel about like spaghetti and meatballs. 95% of the time, they're middling to crap, but when it's done well, like you don't need a lot of ingredients, but like just some people have that magical touch that they can make it transcendently delicious. I mean, I think I talked about it last week. I don't even remember, but like working in catering, we get there real early in the morning and there'd be no food. Normally we'd have leftovers, but sometimes there'd be nothing to eat. So the Mexicans would make scrambled eggs with grilled onions and jalapenos, warm tortillas, and lime. And it was the most delicious breakfast ever,
Yeah.
And it's just because they just did everything just so to where it was nice.
It's funny. I remember on like one of my first days in Brazil, my companion was explaining some of the peculiarities to me, and he's like, well, one thing you'll learn about Brazilians is that they kind of like to mix a lot of their food together. Like they'll always, obviously they'll always mix their rice and beans together, and sometimes they'll get some tomatoes and mix them in there, which is pretty good. They'll throw some meat in there too. They like mixing it together. And I was like, oh, okay. That sounds pretty normal. And then we go to my mission president's house to eat dinner. I'm a new missionary. And there was this old missionary couple. And we had chili. And then after we were done with the chili, we had brownies for dessert. And he takes a chunk of the brownie and starts like mixing it in with the chili. And I was like, oh, they really do like mixing their food together. And I asked my companion afterward, I was like, so you're right, they do like mixing their food together. He's like, nah, that guy's fucking weird, man. That's not normal Brazilian.
That's just weird, yeah.
So Mexicans are way more European in their sentiments as far as if you're eating down there, they're going to give you like a multi-course meal. Like we would always ask them for a burrito or a quesadilla, and they'd be like, no, what are you talking about? We'd have to have, you got to sit down, you have to have the soup, entree, you have to have the rice, entree, you have to have it in order. And you would have to create the burrito or the taco yourself. You never had it served to you as the burrito or the taco. And the complaint of the Slopgate people is like, we keep our things all separate and all this sort of stuff, and that extrapolates out to all these, like Peterson talks about ideas of like the left likes to mix everything and the right likes to keep hard lines between the things, and it's right down to people's personality traits or something like that. But Mexicans are way more like that. It's in the U.S. where they started slopping it together, and I think slop is really American food. It's Americans that slop. We're the melting pot of the world, man.
Well, I don't know. This is what I think it comes down to. It's about working class.
Yeah.
The whole point of a burrito is that it's a 4-course meal rolled up into something you can
it's fast
and eat.
So you can get back to work.
That's what a shepherd's pie is. It's the same thing.
That's what sushi was too. And things that become delicacies across the world are usually peasant food where they come from, because it was some sort of like fast thing.
And that's what pizza is. It's a separated meal put on a piece of bread so you can walk and eat something you can eat fast. Like same thing like pho, like the Vietnamese beef noodle soup. That came about as a quick way for field workers to have lunch.
Yeah.
Put it all.
So that's one of the things I tried to look it up because I can't pull it up. The distributors, he had a kind of a long thing, which he brought up a couple interesting ideas in it, but he had a debate with Local Distance on Benjamin Boyce's channel, which I mentioned before, and then he was recapping it. But he talked about Slopgate, and he says that one of the only things that will create the new tradition that carries on will be somebody creating some sort of new culinary tradition of events, certain types of foods that have pageantry with them for events. He thinks that's the only thing that will maybe catch on in the future. Like he's talking about like how there used to be some sort of he said in his Catholic tradition they had fish goulash on Christmas Eve or something like that, but now that's gone and dead. But he says whoever could invent some sort of new thing like that is going to do better. If it's based around some sort of food thing like that, it's going to do better than any sort of group going around saying we're inventing our Thrive, right? In place of Thrive, you invent something that's like a meal. Like maybe you could even look at Jimmy Kimmel and Adam Carolla inventing that Feast of San Gennaro or whatever that they started doing for years. But that's his prediction anyway, is that it's the next tradition is going to be some sort of a food-centered thing if it actually holds together.
Like food is always being invented. Like I was surprised to learn like tiramisu was invented in like the 1970s. Like it's actually pretty recent, you know. Like there's not a Vietnamese thing. There's a Filipino thing that I want to try someday, but it's called a boodle fight. But it was developed by American servicemen. Like in a boodle fight is like you put a bunch of banana leaves on the floor, and then you put a bunch of gloops of food on the banana leaves, and then there's no silverware, and that's a new thing, you know. And like in Filipino restaurants in America, you can like call ahead and reserve, and there's like a minimum of 5 people or whatever usually, but you can do a boodle fight, but it's not traditional Philippine food. It was American servicemen in the Philippines who came up with this crazy thing.
That's what happens so much. You remember Alton Brown tried to claim that it was like Koreans, and he gave some sort of critical race theory, like at the camera, talking about saying that like Korean fried chicken or like chicken fried wings was invented by Koreans or like black people in Korea or something like that. But
so dumb.
It turned out to not be true. Somebody looked it up and it wasn't true at all. And he gave a sneer on a show about it.
But also, that's a bad thing. Is, you know, there's a very famous, very popular Korean dish that is also fairly recent. They call it army stew, and part of what makes it army stew is it's got a little bit of everything in it, including like spam and ramen. And it is 100% because of the American military presence, especially with American food aid after the Korean War, where the Americans flooded Korea with cheap food that kept for a long time, like spam and ramen. And just the other day, I saw like in Singapore or something, somebody had created the army stew pizza, Korean army stew pizza served in Singapore, you know?
Yeah. See, watch this. Here, I'll show it to you real quick. If you hadn't ever seen this before, this will make
probably piss me off.
No way.
Oh.
Korean fried chicken is by far the best fried chicken on the face of the earth.
And you know why? Because it was taught to Korean cooks by African American GIs after the World War.
That's so retarded.
It's not true. Yeah, people looked it up and
debunked it. I don't know. The Hmong people in Northern California, where I was a missionary, one of their most common dishes they served was fried chicken, but done Hmong style, which wasn't all that different. But I mean, for one thing, that's ridiculous because first, chickens originated in Vietnam, and they had frying techniques in Vietnam going back a long, long way. So if anybody invented fried chicken,
but Alton Brown gave a That's so frustrating. Anytime I go losing respect for somebody who I really, really like just because of these little things, and I hate it myself, that I go like, oh, now I have to hate you. But I don't hate it. It's just that me thing that he has at the end of it.
One of the most, just one of those little facts of history that fly in the face of all this woke shit is that the wealthiest person who ever lived, like in terms of how much wealth he had compared to how much wealth existed on planet Earth at the time, was a 14th century Malian black Muslim slave owner. That's the richest man ever. It wasn't a Western capitalist. It was a black Muslim slave owner in Timbuktu in the middle of the fucking desert.
You are a bigot. Anyway,
Oh.
Does does he owe us reparations?
No,
think
but
so.
here's the other thing that's so hilarious is because like part of his legacy was like he's considered like this great, wonderful leader because he was famously kind to his slaves.
Mm. Don't think that's all the Ottoman Empire and all that stuff. I've listened to a bunch of different stuff about what they did with their slaves, putting them on boats, rowing, and the stuff that they had to do, and it was extremely harsh and extremely difficult. And they'd castrate their people. One of the only reasons we still have our population today, and those other places don't have their populations that they enslaved, is because they castrated them. Unlike us, who you can say, "Oh my gosh, shake your head," that they'd separate children and families and that sort of stuff, but they could have them. That's not great. We're not saying that's great, but once again, there's a level, there's a triage here. Those other guys just cut off their balls and wieners.
I once saw somebody answering the question. Somebody asked the question like, "Well, what arguments did the Southern slave owners make, leading up to the Civil War?" And one of the things I thought was interesting because it was basically the socialist argument is like one of the things they said is like, "Hey, like we are responsible for our workers. Like we have to take care of them. We have to ensure that they're, that they can survive. Unlike you Northerners, you put your factory workers are just slaves, except that you have no legal or social obligation to them. If you're done with them, you just fire them, and now they're homeless and hungry. Like the slave owners, you weren't allowed to do that. Like if you didn't have enough work for your slaves, well, that was your problem. You had to keep them,
Yeah, you just reminded me that I watched Gone with the Wind this week.
Yeah.
That was almost completely off my mind. And the
Where
whole
did you
thing
watch it?
on HBO.
I've got HBO.
And that's where it started out with I sent you guys the clip, but I don't think I
that's
find it fast. It started out with a trigger warning at the beginning of it. And then I watched the whole thing, but then of course, one of the things you had to be trigger warned about is that it sure seemed like the slaves were treated mostly well, and part of the family and living at the house, and that's what you had to have the trigger warning about. And I still, in that situation, wouldn't want to be a slave. I wouldn't want to be somebody who still just had to wait on other people all day, and that's just where you were stuck being. But there is some truth to it that usually when Hollywood goes showing that every single slave driver was some drunken whooper or something like that is not really the case of what was happening, which doesn't make it okay. It doesn't make it okay. But then there's worse levels. There's worse levels like how the Ottomans treated their slaves.
I definitely would have been an abolitionist if I were alive then. I'd be very brave to.
You hate the slavery.
I hate slavery so much.
Yeah,
like this is one of the things that they intentionally get wrong, which is because okay, slavery was bad. Of course, we know that, but like the worst parts of it were not normal in America. Like there was always people who looked down on people who mistreated slaves. I mean, you might say the whole system is mistreatment, but we know it's not because of how many, like the famous thing that like after the Emancipation Proclamation came, many slaves elected to stay employed with their former masters.
Yeah, it's
right?
like
and maybe it's because they had a positive relationship. It's not impossible, it's not outside of the realm of possibility that in an economic system that we no longer hold, but that in that time,
people try to talk about how they'll try to talk about how terrible the Bible is for having instructions on how to treat your slave. And I was like, what do you think the Bible's going to do to a bunch of slaves? Is it going to say you can't own slaves anymore? And they're going to be like, we're not reading this fucking book. We're still going to own slaves.
The Bible says have sex with frogs, not with children. Let's see here. I just heard Jim Glee's video today. Yeah, he talked about American Maoism today. Just kind of summed it all up. I never heard the history of China spelled out like that today. Yeah, that's what Mao. I mean, we are going through a cultural revolution. It is the exact same thing, and it's been hard to scream it or explain it to people. But once again, I'll refer everybody to Jonathan. It's some of his lower watched videos, probably because it's a little bit more scholastic, like it's a bit like going to school, but you got to watch the stuff that he put together on the Chinese Revolution and see that it really is the exact same thing we're going to. A revolution where the same people stay in power is a Maoist revolution, a Chinese revolution, a cultural revolution. We are apt unless we do something. It is true. They will say literally anything to progress their narrative. I hate casseroles. Oh, you're just saying that to progress your narrative. Just kidding. I like casseroles. I like chicken noodly casseroles. What's up, Christopher Rice, Simon Gruber, and yep, it's literally communism, and everything outside the United States generally tastes better. That is larger too. We're gonna keep going with cultural appropriation. We got a viral video that's about to go viral.
Oh, that's
This is gonna go
funny. Like
viral.
my Dumas. I was hanging out with Dumas the other day. And he was talking about being at the second largest mall in the world, which is in Honolulu or something, and they have this gigantic food court. And he talked about how he thought it was so funny because, like, you know, it's this famous food court with all this incredibly fancy international food all over the world. But he said the line for Chick-fil-A is entirely locals and stretched out the door and around the corner.
Okay, see, here's the thing. I don't
I
get
don't.
Chick-fil-A.
I don't either. I don't either.
Like it's not bad. It's enjoyable,
Yeah,
but
it's fine.
people like are creaming their pants over it.
I didn't even think it was fine or enjoyable, although I didn't get the fried version.
I've
But what
never
I got
gone
was like
there.
a hockey puck.
I have never gone there on my own. Like I've never once. If everyone in the group is like, let's go to Chick-fil-A, I'm like, all right, why not?
What I suspect about Chick-fil-A is something I learned many, many years ago working at Papa John's. It was like, 20 years ago, I did a few different stints at Papa John's at different stores under different managers. And I learned then the important thing is that, like, a well-managed Papa John's where, procedures are being adhered to, ingredients are being handled well, they're not messing with the oven, all this stuff. If you do everything correctly, they can make a really good pizza. The reason Papa John's sucks almost all of the time is that they have a culture problem. They treat their employees like shit, and everybody's constantly cutting corners.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A definitely is pretty well managed. That's what I like. They definitely they revolutionized the damn drive-through. That's pretty intense.
What, do that double drive-through or what? What do they?
It's not just the double drive-through. It's that they have guys out there. Like I've been to a Chick-fil-A before where if I go to a drive-through and there's like 3 or more cars, I'm like, fuck it, I'm not that hungry. I'll go home and eat something. Because I'm not patient. But my wife was like, no, you have to go through. There was like 10 cars in the drive-through, and we got through in like 5 minutes or something. It was crazy.
I hate going through drive-thrus in general.
I hate it because, okay, here's the rule. This is a rule, an unspoken drive-through rule. If you want to use the drive-through, you have to already know what the fuck you're gonna get.
You have to know, and you got to minimize your pickiness. Because, like, if you mentioned James, he's been on this show before. That guy used to make me drive through the drive-through with him. And everything was like, I need exactly like 15 sesame seeds on top of the button, please. But I'm driving because this guy's like half blind. So he'd have to yell. I'd have to say all the stuff for him. And that drives me insane.
I have never seen him simply order off a menu. Everything has modifications.
Everything has modifications and weird ones. And then if you're going through a drive-through, you have to order it for him.
That's one thing I always thought. One of my first jobs, I worked at the airport snack bar in the 90s in the pre 9/11 days. And it was the busiest concourse of the airport. And I worked at the TCBY Express. So it was a TCBY yogurt, but not even a full TCBY yogurt. It was the Express. So it had a limited menu. And so there's like literally 4 flavors that were printed like on menus in 3 different places in plain sight, right? And I mean, super simple. And the lines people would be in line for 45 minutes easily. And I was just so shocked as they finally got up to the point. I'd be like, what can I get for you? And they'd be like, what are your flavors?
Yeah, that's where The soup Nazi Seinfeld episode goes down in history. But this is even worse than Dumas. I was talking about it to Kevin today because Kevin's going to visit his mission for the first time in 20-something years. I visited my mission somewhere like 5 or 6, 7 years after, and I took my ex-wife at the time, and this might have been the beginning of the end for us, or the end of the end. But I'm speaking for her again because we have to speak Spanish, right? And when she'd go to places and be like, tell them I don't want the onion. Tell them I don't want the onion. This is in Mexico. And then they put the onion on and say, take it back and tell them no onion. And I'm like, no, not in Mexico, you stupid. Like, we're not doing that. And I'm not doing it for you.
Yeah, I'm not going to be
word onion.
I'm not going to be a needy bitch on your behalf.
And not in Mexico. Like, no way. Oh man, that was terrible. Let's go. Mexico. I said it wrong. I'm a white supremacist.
Mexico.
Mexico. That's why, I am Cristobal. Cristobal. I think the accent's over the O, so I spell it Cristobal.
I think I thought it was funny because I started going by Flip because I got tired of Americans saying my name wrong, right? And then I worked with a whole bunch of Mexicans. I'm like, God damn it, this backfired. Because they can't say Flip. They say Felipe.
And Jared is the creator of memes and ignorer of virtues. Oh, that's people criticizing you for this.
Yeah, I was called out for this.
Let's watch this. Is the volume up? Yeah.
This is white privilege and white supremacy at its finest. I mean, if you're gonna say the names, at least learn how to say them correctly. It's Esmeralda.
Don't be sorry, Father.
I'm not gonna get tired of that.
And this is in Honduras, both born in Honduras. In Honduras,
like he's pronouncing the H while trying to do.
He catches himself just about every time. I've heard him do this a million times. He goes, and this is in Honduras.
Excited or animado? Muy bien.
I like your translations here on the bottom.
I didn't write.
You just let the thing did it.
Yeah, I was like, it'd be pretty funny to see what the thing thinks he's trying to say.
That's what the AI thinks the words are. As Honduranano, as super excited, or any model again. What's any model? That's some other word.
Bien.
Oh, animado. Averle. White supremacy. You can't say ver or you're white supremacist. Ver.
There's a whole subset of the population that just completely lacks the ability to roll their R's.
And they're white supremacists.
They're just doomed to white supremacy.
Doomed to white supremacy.
That's pretty ableist of you, Natasha Helfa Parker.
Odio que soy hombre blanco derecho.
Why didn't you just stay muy católicos? So I co-host for
I was saying to you guys earlier, it drives me crazy. Like if somebody says the easy word in the other language and skips the hard words, like nobody's gonna not understand the word Catholic. No Mexican's gonna not understand that word Catholic. They didn't understand the rest of the sentence.
He actually goes on to clarify that he meant Catholic. Like I cut that part out.
That was Catholic, in case you didn't know.
Yeah, he's like, why didn't you say Católico? Catholic.
So I was saying,
okay, Dora the Explorer. Thanks.
I see it all the time. They say the example I use is like, I see people say, "Did you use the desalination processor on the water?" Oh wait, sorry. Did you use the desalination processor on el agua? Yeah, like you didn't. You didn't make the. They understood that part.
Gerardo. Hey, Gerardo.
Gerardo. I am Amigo Antoya.
Mexico.
I love that you did that.
It looks so much like he's arguing.
Los testigos de Jehová.
Yeah.
Los testigos de Jehová.
He tries Los Evangelicos. It's half Latino.
We were coffee drinkers. Drink your coffee.
Café.
Drink lots and lots of coffee. Glasses of coffees.
Café.
We shouldn't be drinking coffee.
Café.
So dorky right there.
Café. She says coffee each time, and he's like cafe. Gerardo says Mexico. He says Mexico, Mexico, Mexico.
Coffee.
Did you identify as a laminita?
Sometimes these Spanish words, when you take them and you sort of kind of overpronounce them, and it's kind of annoying.
Really? I hate the fact that I'm a straight white male.
Jared, how did you overlook that children get abused in the world, though?
That's what I got. Some dude got mad on one of the things I posted it on. He's like, what's the context of her getting mad at the Esmeralda thing? And I was like, it's Jody Hildebrandt was complaining about illegal immigrants, and she said she used the name Esmeralda as an example, and Natasha Elva Parker took umbrage with that, and the guy's like, it's kind of interesting that the creator of this meme decided to overlook all of the childhood sexual abuse that was going on in the Jody Hildebrandt thing just to make Natasha Helfer Parker look woke.
That's exactly. Wait, because first off, sex. Did he really say sexual abuse? Like, I didn't know there's any allegations of anything sexual with him. I thought it was just he tied him up and didn't feed him and stuff.
You could call it maybe in the sense of like they seem to link it to they punish kids for porn watching or thinking about porn, but it is just saying stop the porn, stop the dirty thoughts, or you get beat up or something. But.
I mean, whatever happened, it was pretty bad from everything that I've heard. Jody Hildebrandt is a very troubled piece of shit. But
I didn't hear anything about it being necessarily like sexual abuse, but.
It's just funny.
No, it's not. It's not sexual abuse in the traditional sense that you're saying. No.
Yeah, like, it's just funny because I don't know, like how somebody could be talking about 9/11, and if during 9/11 they say, and I think maybe Hitler wasn't so wrong about everything. Just one brief sentence, and then I say, hang on a second, he said Hitler wasn't wrong about something. It's funny that you zoom in on that part and.
First off, the guy hadn't watched the episode, and we've done the work. You haven't watched it. We've done the work. But he had to ask what the episode was about to chastise you about it.
Yeah.
You had to fill him in.
Well, I knew that he was going to do that.
You had to fill him in about what you're overlooking.
I know. I knew it was going to happen when he asked about
it. He didn't know it was you.
Yeah, no, he didn't seem to know it was me, but as soon as he asked about the context, I was like, okay, like, I mean, I'm not trying to hide the context, but as soon as he asked about the context of her asking, I was like, I know he's just going to search for anything to tear this meme down because it's.
But still, that context of that clip was them claiming that it's being mean to Hispanics to pronounce words wrong. That was a context of a different subject inside of the whole Hildebrandt whatever, and whatever person. And not only that, I answered him like Jared's. Well, I didn't say Jared. I'm saying I know the creator of this, and this creator talks crap on child abusers all the time. Yet you focused on wokeness. But
it's fun stuff.
Let's see. Well, we got Jody Hildebrandt here, man. Way. Canes, you want to know what? I'm gonna dox myself a little bit, but I live fairly close to the Post Malone Canes. It's close enough that like it can keep me awake at night, like Kramer's. What was that episode with Kramer and what was that? Kenny Rogers chicken. Yeah, I'm living the Kramer Kenny Rogers chicken episode with that giant pink Post Malone Canes out there. And right up the street, there's a normal Post Canes, and nobody goes to it. And it's brand new and it's nice. And everybody goes to that other one because it's pink.
Because Post Malone needs a little more money.
And so we're wondering like why people go to Chick-fil-A and all that stuff. You could go check that line at the Post Malone Canes and go check the line at the non-Post Malone Canes really close at the same time. And then just try to explain people to me. Like, why are we even trying to deal with people? Why are we doing this? Are you married to a Latina girl? No, I know. My ex-wife was as green as it gets and a pain in the arse. But that's many, many moons ago. Many moons ago. Did I just culture appropriate? In my Spanish class, this girl called me Cristobal. Yeah, Cristobal.
Christopher Rice is going for what is it? Risto. I listened to
Warming
his
up into like 3
thing
years.
that he's
now.
apparently the what is it, Finnish in Finland, I guess, when they have they shorten the name Christopher to Risto. Yeah, he
I didn't
mentioned
know
that.
that.
Yeah, the interview that he sent us, he mentioned that to the guy. He's like, I want to be called Risto. That's cool.
So that most of that actually comes from the episode with David Archuleta's mema. Which I would say that's the most interesting part of that episode, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean the episode itself wasn't like, it was Dehlin being cringy, but like she seems like a really sweet lady, you know. She's just
It's cringe central. I mean, there's a little bit much of, for me, constant crying. You know, it's your Finnish nickname, but there's no big deal. I mean, it's what you would expect from that episode. Did you guys, either of you, watch the 6 hours of? See, that's just it. The guy who's chastising you. I've done the work. Not only did I do 12 hours last week or whatever, I did these 6 hours too.
Oh, I haven't seen that one. I spent way too much time today making that goddamn TikTok.
Well, I'm not going to go over much of it, but I actually wrote down the time frames to do only like 2 little parts. But all it took was Jody Hildebrandt for John Dehlin to become a men's rights activist. That's all it took. Finally there, folks. We're getting everything we want, because I'm going to talk a little bit later about Mormonism Live and RFM. I swear I know this dude. I keep seeing, maybe Mormons just all look alike now.
Wasn't he in Home Alone?
Oh yeah,
That's where
is
he's
that
from.
guy. Yeah. Let me see if this works.
Ta-da! You know, send it to them, but I don't know. I just still feel so much guilt and shame.
Is there a way you want people? Is there a way people can contact you if they want to support your parents?
I'll put it at Venmo, but that money that I put will be evenly distributed with every victim that comes forward. That's it. I won't take it.
Okay.
I'm not gonna do it.
This one little part that he wouldn't take money when that other girl was just like, oh, thanks, take me all the money and all that sorts of stuff. But so this guy, Jody Hildebrandt was his therapist years ago, and it was his marriage therapist. And through their marriage therapy, they started demonizing him as a porn watcher and the porn or whatever. Even if he did it like very little, that made him a possible rapist, kicked out of the house, lost his children, all that sorts of stuff. All the sorts of things that Dehlin, if he was at all sympathetic to the other side, he would just throw this guy right under the bus for, with zero, it wouldn't take any prompting at all. But this guy had a bunch of the details, and he has a bunch of subpoenas. He pulled a bunch of papers that it was all a bunch of crap that his ex-wife and Jody Hildebrandt were pulling on him to alienate him from his kids and that sort of stuff. And of course, John Dehlin's on the side. And what's really strange about this to me is, if either of you looked at any of the Danny Masterson stuff, this is like a tough needle to thread talking about this stuff, because Jared got chastised for saying, "What are you focusing on? Why don't you just think of the victims?" And the victims and all the stuff and how horrible it all is all plenty out there. But there's something in the middle of all of this that one of the first things I ever preached on here was due process and the null hypothesis and all that sorts of stuff. And there's all sorts of accusations and things being thrown around and all this stuff, and just jumping on sides when it's convenient. But what do you guys know about the Danny Masterson situation?
Everything I know about it is because I am, I lurk in anti-Scientology Facebook groups. And so their whole thing is just, he's 100% guilty because Scientology. But I never actually heard any of the evidence or the case.
Not only did you nail it, it was covered on the cultural, I forget what it's called. It's Tim Cass's cultural podcast that he's not on. Other people are on it. But there was a journalist, or a type of journalist. She was like a People magazine journalist type person.
Tabloid.
Not like a tabloid, but this one was on the side of she asked online, is Danny Masterson on trial or is Scientology on trial? and she lost her webpage for asking that. Like
Yeah.
what you just asked right there, what you just said.
Damn.
She lost her Instagram. She lost all. She got kicked off of everything for asking that question.
For years, I mean, I only lurked. I don't even participate in that page. Like many years ago, I did, and I stopped because like everywhere else I go, I got shouted down for saying like it's not okay to be bigoted against Scientology. You know, like I think the last time I remember years ago, somebody was like bragging about how they went into a Scientology business and stole all of their Scientology pamphlets. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, first off, you're just giving them ammunition, you know?
Yeah, they're
'Cause
persecuted now.
Yeah,
Thanks.
now they're persecuted, and you're doing the persecuting. Good job, way to go, you know. And so, like, you know, since then I just lurked, and then, but for the longest time I thought it's so creepy because it's like these people really have it out for them, and they had it like long before there's any trial, long before there was even any evidence to speak of. They're just like, oh, he has to be because Scientology. Like it literally was just that. And like I never actually heard the case against him. All I ever heard is he was accused and Scientology covered for him. No evidence, just that's just the claim. And yeah. So I mean, and I never really looked into it more than that because I'm frankly just not that interested.
You know,
But-
so this sounds comical to a lot of people that know me, but I feel like most of my personal problems in life have to do with an over-exaggerated sense of empathy. And I know I hate that word, right? But I can't tell you how ironic it is to be lectured on empathy by some of the cruelest people I've ever met. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm on this the ex-Mormon Facebook page. You probably been kicked out of there, but
it was a long time ago.
Anyway, so there's this.
I got kicked out. I got kicked out for saying it's not okay to be bigoted against Mormons.
Well, there's this one woman there who she's like the top contributor of like always, and people. She's got an army of simps orbiting around her, obviously, and she's oftentimes will just post things about herself, which is pretty cringy. But she said something about Scientology. And she posted a screenshot of this. She said something shitty about Scientology, and this lady was like, "Well, I'm a Scientologist, and I think it's actually pretty good." And she was like, "No, fuck you and fuck all Scientologists. You guys are a terrible cult." And she's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna get banned for being mean to Scientology." And I was like, first off, that probably not.
Yeah.
But like, and I even said, I was like, "Look, Scientology." I'm pretty comfortable calling it an evil organization.
Yeah.
But the reason that it's an evil organization is because it takes advantage of very vulnerable people without like a social network of like people who are estranged from their families and things like that. Those people, the grunts that you're screaming at and from supposedly a moral high ground, they're in a bad place. And the only person that picked them up out of that bad place just so happened to be a predator organization. And so have some goddamn empathy. This woman has literally chastised me for empathy before. Like she told me that I'm unempathetic, and I'm like,
Yeah, like I got thrown out of ex-Mormon Facebook group after a 3-day flame war because a woman posted, like I can almost say it verbatim. It's burned in my memory. She said, "I'm a recruiter for a company in Utah. I see all of these resumes that list the MTC and BYU as work experience. Shake my head."
I brought this up the first time I was on Midnight Mormons. This scenario, yeah.
And I was like,
that's why they had me on, is to talk
like,
about it.
and I said, like, you know, like, there's nothing wrong with that. That's legitimate experience. You're just being a bigot. And of course, everybody's like, "How dare you call her a bigot?" It's like, no, that's naked bigotry. Like. And it's not just naked bigotry; it's illegal in America. You
and then
cannot discriminate. Like I remember when my first
Flip
comment
got
was like,
removed for using the word bigot, and
I did, yeah.
I got piled on for telling him that it was illegal, and I'm an HR director and I know it's illegal.
Yeah,
and,
but I mean, I remember using the like specific, like my first comment. I said, "Imagine if instead of BYU, it said Madras," you know. And instead of MPC, you know, it said, you know, yeah, whatever, Madras, something like that. Like, you would understand that as being anti-Muslim bias, but for some reason you guys are okay with anti-Mormon bias. You know,
the flip end of it too, to use the flip word, is that Flip's gone harder into Scientology than any one of them. He read about it, he learned about it, he thinks they're nuts, he tells you how nuts they are. He's
like,
you know,
when that episode of South Park aired, I watched it when it aired, and I was still awake at 7 a.m. because seriously, that show aired at 10. It was over at 10:30. I was on the internet, and 7 a.m. I was still like. By the end of the night, I had downloaded all of the secret Scientology documents from the Swedish government. Like I had emptied the clambake.com. And then I'm not exaggerating. For the next 2 weeks, I spent at least 5 hours every evening just reading Scientology shit.
Damn.
And then I really went off the deep end just because I was like, no way, because there's that the famous South Park thing where he said this is what Scientology
This is what they actually believe.
And I was like, no way, no way. And then I was like, holy shit, it's all real.
Damn.
But Scientology does have decent saunas, says Christopher. Anyway, we're gonna flex our due process or null hypothesis claims again because Dehlin just jumps on whatever bias that work for him at the moment, which I'm going to kind of show right here. But that Danny Masterson thing, once again, like we have to stop and explain to people. Like Jared's video earlier doesn't say, this says that I love Jody Hildebrandt. Like that didn't say
I
that.
support everything she's ever done.
That didn't say that in there at all. And I'm not saying that I think Danny Masterson's innocent. I also don't think he's guilty. That's how the null hypothesis works. There's 3 women who 2 decades ago say things happened. One of them was in a 6-year relationship with him while she claims that it happened. One of them says that she was roofied and raped, but she was afraid to bring it up because the Scientology world would have been mean to her or something like that. The third lady said it was a Cosby scenario. So it was a date rape. Like she went over to his house and they did drugs together or whatever. But then next thing she knew, she was getting raped by him. And then the third one said it was the same scenario, only the rape is ultimately just that he had a higher power level than her in the world. Yeah. So it wasn't like a rape.
You've just told me more than I ever heard in all the years of following the Scientology group that posts about this trial literally every single day.
It took a long time to find those details too. And then what's strange is that the way that they framed it, like I was reading it in People magazine, and the way they'd frame it is they'd say first there was this girl, second there was this girl, third there was this girl, and then they'd say it, and then they say, and then there was a defendant of this, and then there was a defendant, and you look into it, and it was one of the same 3 girls. And you look into the thing, and the way they were writing it was trying to make it sound like there's 55 girls. No, it was the same 3 girls. And one of them was thrown out entirely by the judges because they were boyfriend, girlfriend at the time, and she's just making a claim or whatever. But they were all jilted girlfriends, and this is all two decades ago. All of them ultimately brought up only within the last couple years. And the answer to it is maybe it did, maybe it didn't. There's 0 way to prove it. It's Blackstone's formulation. It's ridiculous. The guy got 30 freaking years for that.
Yeah, that's obscene. That's obscene.
Well, so the problem is that even if you just point that out, like even if you just point out the whole, wait a minute, you're trying to make it seem like 50 girls. It looks like it's only 3. That alone is enough for people to jump on you and just start telling you that you're a rape apologist. I can't tell you how many times I've been called a rape apologist just because I've said, well, maybe this thing is too harsh, or like I don't know if this guy did these things.
How dare you not know?
No, I know that's one of my favorite things about like anytime something happens and you're supposed to immediately have an opinion on it. It's one of the things I actually respect about Destiny is that he will say, look, it's the easiest thing in the world to not form an opinion immediately. Just wait for a fucking second.
Yeah.
And it's easy to not form an opinion when you just can't know. You don't know. There's no way to know about the Danny Masterson thing. So you have to land on actually don't know. And don't know means can't convict the guy on it. It's 2 decades ago, and the word of women who are definitely the types of women, they're all actresses. They all feel jilted. They all want to be seen in the world and whatever. They even announced, like in some of their Instagram announcements, like, I'm an amazing woman. Like they say this about themselves. This is their own phrasing. I'm an amazing woman who just dares to speak out against the patriarchy. And you go, well, maybe it did happen, lady, but at the same time, maybe you are just jumping on something. But who knows? The answer to it is we can't know, and we should not be convicting people for 30 years for this types of stuff.
What's insane to me, how often you hear people say, like, well, why would she lie about that? I remember Sam Harris saying that about Christine Blasey Ford. What possible motivation could she have for lying about it? I was like, are you high right now, man? Because people will lie and throw each other under the bus for much less things.
Yeah.
I mean,
so that came up multiple times on this opposite side of stuff here, all of a sudden with Dehlin here, saying that exact same thing. Why would they lie? Why would somebody lie about that? And that being detrimental to this guy's
How about
lie.
revenge?
How about
That's
that?
the reason to lie. How about you can sell your story for $1 million?
How about they get whipped up by a crazy therapist that you guys say that we didn't pay attention enough to? But this is them talking about that crazy therapist whipping a lady up into thinking that a guy just being sexual at all towards his wife is rape. That's in the world. We're allowed to say this is in the world now. We're allowed to say it exists.
Yeah, I think that, like, if like a genie appeared to me right now, or some magic being, and said, okay, here's what's going to happen. Somebody is about to be given the I'm going to give the option to somebody to break the story that you are a pedophile, and I'm going to give them $2 million to do that. But you get to choose who I try to tempt with this money. It would take me a long time to sit down and deliberate who I would trust to not totally throw me under the bus for that. Like, I would like for people to think about that, like, think, okay, who would you trust to do that? Because there's very few people.
Yeah. So the one thing I'll say about this guy, because for me, somebody who's been through it with a woman, and you can also know maybe that I'm telling the truth, that I've been with other women and I don't say that they are nuts, and there was one that was nuts. And this guy talks about his ex-wife doing very vindictive, crazy things. And I can believe those pretty easily. I get it. You know what I mean? But this, one of the things about it is, so this guy, when he was a kid, went through some pretty bad molestation in the scouting world. He was somebody who, there was a documentary made on him for it or something like that. But he then went and whistle blew and got one of those scouting guys arrested for the thing. But then he has a whole backstory about being targeted by the church for being somebody who whistle blew on the scouting organization, and then going to BYU and being assigned Jody Hildebrand as his counselor, and then him getting painted up as a sexual predator, and them using some of his testimony from the scouting stuff as saying, look, this guy's likely a predator because he's been raped in scouting.
Good Lord.
Yeah. And that there's a little bit of it that kind of half goes, man, that's why I pulled up this Cormac McCarthy quote, because this is when the lamb is lost in the mountain. He said, "Day is Christ. Sometime come the mother, sometime the wolf." And it's talking about like how harsh the reality is of like some, especially like Nature's Metal Channel, like some little baby or something like that is crying, and what shows up is it's already been through some sort of traumatic thing, and what shows up is a predator to eat it.
Oh.
I'm going to say that happened to this guy 3 times, because now here he is on John Dehlin. This guy got ran over, or just found himself in a weird little space of being abused and used in scouting, then abused and used by Jody Hildebrand in the Mormon world. And now sometimes instead of the mother coming when he's a crying, struggling man, sometimes the wolf shows up. and he shows up to then bolster his channel, talk about his stuff, suddenly talk about the flip side of everything. Like he's suddenly like a men's rights activist for like he wouldn't throw this guy right under the bus if he didn't have just the slightest reason to believe the women's. And here he is basically saying, did I flip back over to it?
No, you didn't.
Though none of these were directly abusive to her person. Yet she reported a very scary night when he stalked her around the apartment and she felt he might rape her.
Yeah, she felt that I might. That's it. And if you look at later when Jody's giving Morwenna letters to write, in the letters to solicit more women into the program, now I'm the child rapist and I'm the person that raped her and she's the victim of rape. And they're in the letters. They've evolved.
And again, it's like feelings or truth.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't
Hold
say.
on a second.
Wait a second.
Wait a minute.
Hold on. Wait a minute. Are we supposed to laugh at this right now? Are you guys glossing over the entire harrowing case that this guy just went through just to pwn John Dehlin for saying a dumb thing?
Yes.
Those are the options.
Because unlike John Dehlin, because through all these episodes, he's been bragging that they've been his highest viewed episodes and that we need him to go more viral. And this is also viral, but it's for these guys and all that sorts of stuff. But, you know,
we're responsible for our action.
But John Dehlin Shapiro here says
evolved.
And again, it's like feelings or truth.
Yeah. We're responsible for our actions, not someone else's feelings.
And by the way,
feelings
rape is real and assault is real and the sexual assault is real and women face disproportionately egregious levels of assault and rape. So this is not to say don't believe victims.
Yeah, it's true. It's hiding behind the triggers that these people got away with murder.
Yeah.
That's
So
what you
continuing,
do. You really
Morwenna-
feel the need to just, in the middle of this guy pouring his heart out and being on the verge of tears, remembering it the whole time. You're
Gotta
just like,
stop
oh,
and
so
make
I don't
sure-
want you to think, I don't want you to doubt women.
Mhm.
And the guy's like, well,
Gotta
except,
stop and
except
make
for the
sure
woman
that-
that tried to frame me. Doubt her, please.
Mhm. So let's
And if
see
I
here.
believed all women, I'd start believing Jen Camp.
Yeah, that we got that coming up too, because she tried to disbar RFM.
How does that even work?
You just
That's
put in
a
a
thing you
bar
can do?
complaint.
Oh.
And he even mentions in there that like it's just he says you're not a real lawyer until you get your first bar complaint, and he's had several of them and none of them have come to fruition. And it sounds like a pretty normal thing, especially in situations like divorce lawyers.
Yeah.
Because if you get fucked by your spouse in divorce court, they try to take it out on the lawyer or whatever.
I think this is a. Is that it? Dang it. Somewhere right around here. Let's listen for a
She
second.
left our baby's door open when she got in the car. The door's open, the car seat's there. I'm just shocked because that was a huge trigger for me in my psych evaluation report that she'd been reading and that Jody had been reading and that they've been sharing with everyone. And so, yeah, if you feel me right at that moment, I probably looked disturbed, but not angry or upset at anyone. And then I noticed that she's driving away with the door open to our baby. And I just looked over and I said, wait, hold on. And I waved to her. I said, you left the door open. And she goes, oh, okay. And I said, I'll just shut this door. So I shut the door and I just waved to the kids goodbye. And that's what happened. And 3 or 4 days later, when I went to pick up the kids for something, I got subpoenaed like a half-inch page of papers. And those papers said that I had 4 felony charges against me. And they had exhibits in it. And one of them was a picture of a card that was like, hope you get better. Her picture of her journals, a book by Elder Holland that said broken things to men. The bishop had talked to me about getting her that. And yeah, I had 4 felony charges. And this itself is an illegal document because breaking a protective order is not a felony in the state of Utah. It's only a felony if you are already a felon. And I had absolutely no criminal record whatsoever. And so I had 4 felonies and it said 20 years in prison that I could get. And I was terrified when I read this. And I went to the bishop And the bishop said that that he would absolutely testify, and he was shocked and acted like it was just so crazy. And then later, the bishop called me in, and it was just crazy. I was now I'm a criminal. I mean, I'm being charged as a criminal. And I remember going to my stake president on a Sunday. I was so worried, and I went into his office, and I had these files of Jody Hildebrandt's files like this big in my hand, and I said, you got to help my family. You got to see these files. And he turned to me and he goes, a woman doesn't just run away from her husband unless there's something.
Oh, the bigoted Mormon church, huh? The patriarchy
strikes again.
Bishop is like, no, I believe your wife.
Yeah. So what does John Dehlin think about that?
That's a biological syndrome. That's not it might be a result of society to some degree, but I think men have this stupid thing in their brain that they just immediately trust things that a woman says.
Yeah.
Gynocentrism.
And I looked at him and I was just shocked. I said, what are you talking about? And he just looked at me and I said, are you talking about like physical violence or sexual abuse? And he goes, aha, just the fact that you said that makes me know that you're guilty of those things.
Oh, God.
And I said, look, you've got to look at these files. This is a cult. You've got to read these. You will see what I'm talking about. I had this huge thing of files. And he looked at me and he said, that's your addiction talking.
Jesus.
And when he said that, I knew Jody had got to him. And it was my stake president. I just remember like I could hardly breathe. That I trusted and believed in this person. And I said, I begged him, please look at these files. And
there's not a thing about this John Dehlin that isn't the reason that you thought Kavanaugh was
I
gay.
know.
Yeah.
He said he absolutely refused to. And then I told him, well, next time you get up at state conference and
I can't remember exactly what John Dehlin's response. It might be just something he just stays quiet through again, which it was just something that comes up a lot here because we're going to point out like some other stuff when it goes to Mormon Live, when you actually get confronted, because one of the things we've been talking about forever is, hey, this whole parental alienation on the male side, there could be a lot of Mormon stories about this, but it's a subject that you guys are going to overlook a whole lot because you're going to keep up your woke bona fides. Imagine he's talking about wokeness when we're talking about bigger things.
Yeah, I wonder when Flip's going to get a Mormon story.
Yeah. The church was absolutely an accomplice in what my ex-wife did to me.
You get on your hands and your knees and you cry for every family out here. You remember that when we needed to help them up.
It's being covered here, but it's being covered because it helps him with his other case that he's making, that the church is bad at doing therapists and we should be the proper therapists. You know, it serves his technocratic.
Yeah, he's using this guy for sure.
That's what I'm saying is like the lamb is right in front of another wolf who is using and exploiting this guy.
You wouldn't even look. You wouldn't even help. And then he yelled at me to get out of his office. He goes, "Get out, just get out." And I left. And my bishop calls me in right after that, and they removed my temple recommend. And he said, I said, "Why?" And he goes, "You called the stake president names." I said, "I didn't call him names." And I told him exactly what happened. And my bishop said, "Well, I don't agree with him, but I have to take your temple recommend." So they took my temple recommend away.
Have
and my
some
bishop
fucking
called
balls. That's still my biggest complaint with Mormonism is it teaches you to not have any balls.
Yeah.
And he said, "I can't go to court to testify for you." The church legal team called and they said that they won't allow me to go to court. He said, "I disagree with it. I know you were doing what I said, but I can't." So I got hung. Now I had criminal charges against me, 4 felonies, which then I looked up in the state of Utah. If you break a protective order.
Come on, I think he like goes on for too long that John's not even going to be forced to kind of confront the,
It's 4 as I'm late for, I remember I had finals and I'm late for one of the criminal court hearings by like 30 minutes. And I get there and.
But that's just, I don't think he just keeps going for a while. So then John can just gloss over it. You know what I mean? He can just gloss over that that's a justification for thinking a guy is guilty. He doesn't have to confront that. You don't have to confront that, John.
Yeah, I feel bad for this dude. He's John Dehlin just using him.
Yeah. But I don't know. The whole story is a big, long, wild story. And then there's some of it too. I mean, I believe the dude and all that stuff, but at the same time, it's like, holy crap, guy. Like, how are you how are you the lamb in front of the wolf every time? Like, what are you doing? You know, not to blame as a victim, you know what I mean? But like, you've been through it. Like, how about we? Let me go to the RFM with last night. Mormonism live, and then we'll look at Jen accusing him a little bit. But please have a tab. Please. Dang it! Dude, they don't have a stupid freaking thing.
It should be illegal.
Yeah, I just say it. So these guys, they are from Slovenia.
Better get it right, or you're a white supremacist.
Oh yeah. Anyway, at some point they start talking about that it's not very far into it. It's somewhere right around here.
Facebook.
Stupid trans.
Already friends, and 6 months
after this.
speaking.
Anyway,
yeah, he really has. I was always like, oh, let's see what it is.
Anyway, they started questioning the church for based reasons. You know, they started saying their first shelf breaker was the jab mandate. So the jab mandate's their shelf breaker, and then he looks at Russell Nelson, and then he looks at the church's investments in pharmaceuticals. And it becomes the thing that he's saying they fly and they move to Utah. They move to the U.S. because they're trying to get away from pharmaceutical authoritarianism as best they possibly can, because they think they're not going to be able to fly again or any sort of thing like that. But the same way that these guys stay quiet, you know, through all that, because the whole point of this thing is like shunning by decree, is they talk about at some point after their self breaks and the vax stuff, they don't mention the vax thing once. They mention it multiple times. It was a big deal to them that the church pushed the vax thing. But these guys, mum is the word on it. They don't really kind of address it. They just kind of say, oh boy, they don't like Mormonism anymore. But then they talk about when this guy would get up in church and he'd get up in fast and testimony meeting, he'd go off in fast and testimony meeting. And some of that also was just kind of typical, I discovered the truth of the church stuff. You know what I mean? But some of it was vax stuff too. But these guys go, mum is the word. And then he got silenced at the church. They turned off his mic like they're wont to do at some of those testimony meetings, right? And then he got a Curtin McConkie letter that he's not allowed to show up. He'd have a restraining order against him. It's almost the same thing that the other guy's facing. He'd have a restraining order against him if he showed up on any sort of church property, and they left it real vague, like et cetera, and that sort of stuff. And then RFM kind of points, and RFM was helping him as his lawyer, saying that, so if he got called to the church for a disciplinary council, he should not show up to it, because then they could technically then arrest him, and he's not currently a citizen, and it could get him deported, you know, sort of deal, because he's got a restraining order against the church. He can't show up if even the stake president or bishop doesn't have the authority to invite him there, because it's from Curtin McConkie that put the restraining order against him, type deal. But my point is they're shaking their heads at the censorship that he was against the jab. Now, once again, you know, we're always pointing back at this sort of stuff, but I guarantee you, Mormonism Live, that you too, as well, would have censored him or shut off his mic at some point in your past 3 years if he was going off about the jab. I promise you would have shut off that mic. But they just kind of like let it float here. It's so strange to me that they just let it float, and I wish there was a part to do it. They just, well, so you don't like the jab? Well, at least you hate Mormons. But we've heard them and seen them shake their heads at people being, oh, they're anti-vaxxers and all that sorts of stuff. But here we're winning, fellas. Like John Dehlin is a men's rights activist now, and Mormonism
Wrap it
Live,
up. Let's be done.
Mormonism Live is now jab skeptical. It's happening. It's happening. It's happening. Did Bill make any more?
No, he hasn't. I think he just
Children's-
gave up on it. I don't know. Because I don't know. He taught my kid that it's good to do drugs, and he taught him that God is dead. I'm waiting for him to teach my kid that he's gay. Who's gonna teach my kid that he's gay if not Bill Reel?
And really, ultimately, too, like most people, because like people kind of point at RFM and kind of he's kind of just like a little bit boomer logic type stuff. I actually think that he holds to things more credibly, because one of the things he talks about in this video with Jen, he'll say stuff like facts don't match up with your feelings and stuff like that. He'll point it out all the sorts of time. And he'll say something about, you know what they'll say about your lived experience. Actually, I think he has a transcript and we can pull that up. And he says, you know what I think about your lived experience? And, you know, he's maybe just, I don't know, boomer oblivious to wokeness and that sorts of stuff. But let's see here. Transcript has moved to the description. What does that mean? Show transcript. Okay. Is that forever now on YouTube?
Wow.
This is my truth. My truth.
Yes, he does shit on the My Truth thing, which is like, as soon as they have their back to the wall, they'll be like, yeah, the whole My Truth thing is bullshit. They love it in theory. They love talking about my own personal experience and my truth and shit like that.
And we need to get into that.
It gets into the legal.
We need to get into that in the gender stuff that's been arguing about. But
Well, yeah, I mean, they use My Truth the way Jacob uses the collective witness model, where it's like, well, when he needs it to work for him, it's valid, and when it doesn't work for him, ignore it.
Yeah, well, it's kind of difficult because what percentage of the collective body of prophets and apostles need to believe anything for it to be true?
No, that's like the reality is I'm annoyed that I didn't think of it sooner, but it's the selective witness model. That's really how that works for him. Is he selects when he wants witnesses to count and when they count, and then he says, "Aha, I'm justified in beating you over the head with this doctrinal opinion."
I feel so. I've developed a bit of sympathy for apologists over the last couple of weeks, and the reason was because I was like, you know what? There are some people I know who engage in apologetics who are, generally speaking, fairly rational, but the second they engage in apologetics, whether it be religious or like religious woke, you know, they immediately leave rationality by the wayside. And I was like, okay, is there a way that I do that? I got to look for a way that I engage in apologetics. And that's when it hit me. I like the Hobbit movies. And
I liked them too.
Trying to explain that to people is very difficult because it's very difficult because obviously they followed up like one of the greatest.
They stretched it too long, and all
they
that.
definitely
That's
did.
True.
Like I'm with it. They stretched it too long. They shouldn't have had the love story in there.
There's a love story in The Hobbit.
It's like Feely,
And
I think. And
not only that, they try to
didn't
make an elf fall in love with a dwarf, and they try to make one of the dwarves.
No.
Yeah.
Elf falls in love with the dwarf is one episode of Star Trek. That's all we need.
But they try to make the dwarf. They try to make the dwarf sexy too for the ladies out there.
Yeah, he's the only dwarf without like a prosthetic forehead.
Peter Dinklage.
No, because it's got to be just like a normal sized human. It's got to be a normal-sized human, just resized, and then this one doesn't have like a big dwarf nose.
But they did that. They ruined Thorin Oakenshield. They threw Legolas in there shamelessly as fan service because Viggo Mortensen turned them down because he said no, Aragorn wasn't in The Hobbit. You hacks.
Like, okay, now that is integrity. It's like, no, I will not take this giant
I know, that's
paycheck
pretty badass.
because Tolkien didn't put me in the book, so I'm out.
And
That's
they
really badass.
And they screwed it up by like submitting to the producers and rushing it so that they could do. They did it on a green screen, right? Most of it's on a green screen, whereas like obviously the Lord of the Rings is one of the probably the best practical effects ever, right? And so yeah, I get it. It's a travesty. I still like the movies.
Wait, I realize I have seen a little bit of The Hobbit, which is I've seen that clip of Ian McKellen on the green screen set breaking down and crying just over just how horrible it all is.
Speaking of which,
Really?
Ian McKellen.
Have you not seen that?
No.
Oh, man, it's sad. I mean, it's because it's always sad to see an old man cry, especially somebody you love as much as Ian McKellen. But like, apparently, shooting that was such a nightmare for him. But like, he felt obligated, and I guess he likes money, and that's okay. But like, yeah,
He just came out recently and said actors should get the crap out of politics.
Oh,
They shouldn't bring it to his roles at all.
Oh, wow, good for him. Him and Elvis. You know that story?
No.
It's one of my favorite. The most amazing thing to respect about Elvis is that because like at the height of the Vietnam War, a journalist asked Elvis his opinion on Vietnam, and Elvis said, "I'm an entertainer. Who cares what I think?"
That's Michael Jordan too. And they'd say, why don't you say stuff about this stuff? He goes, Republicans buy shoes too, man. That's one of his famous lines. So Michael Jordan always stayed out of it, and that's why people still like him and hate LeBron James nowadays. But I like The Hobbit too, but it's just because some of the scenes are fun to see that you always knew and heard about and that sort of deal. And then it is true that there's just a ton of stupid fat in there. But I especially like seeing all the dwarves go over to Bilbo's house. I like that part.
I like Martin Freeman is Martin Freeman is like the perfect cast for Bilbo. He does great. But the thing is, it made me sympathize with Apology.
I almost kind of like wish like they did bad casting for the bad movie so that we could just throw it all out.
I know.
But when they do perfect casting, like we said, Ian McKellen and all that sorts of stuff.
Yeah, they had
Ewan
Bard.
McGregor in that stuff.
Yeah, they had Luke Evans for Bard, and that was great. Like it was a great cast, and I still watch them.
I hate when great casts go to waste. I hate it. Like I wish they didn't do it because it's like now you wasted it because like we could maybe reboot this and get somebody better or something.
Well, yeah, no, like for example, in that Ahsoka show, which I haven't kept up with, I keep thinking I'll go back to it.
If you want to keep up with it, you're gonna have to see the final one in theaters. You know
that? Okay.
They're gonna put theaters the end of the
because
season.
like they have some like of these cameos that I'm like, oh, and then I'm like, oh, because like it's what a great actor and what a dumb role. But Tim Meadows pops up, and Christopher Lloyd.
You know, and some of the other stuff, Lloyd's in a bunch of them now.
Does it feel out of place? I haven't
put
seen
Jack Black and Lizzo in other ones.
Yeah, I know.
That was bad. I did not like. Well, here's the thing: Jack Black can at least act.
They put Stacey
Lizzo
Abrams.
is a terrible actor. She's terrible, and it's not even one of those things where like, because you know, like some terrible actors, if you give them the right role and a costume and the right lines to say, well, they'll do fine. Lizzo does a bad job.
They
But anyway,
put Stacey Abrams. They put Stacey Abrams in it.
No, so did
Stacey Abrams, that Georgia lady who refused to
she's
accept the
awful.
vote.
Well,
She was in
then
it as like the Grand High Commander of the world.
Wait,
or
how
something
come
like
she's
that.
not been arrested for subverting democracy?
Oh, they just haven't gotten around to it. They'll get around. to it.
she just so happened to be correct about it.
Oh yes.
Jeez, Bucket, what are you doing?
No,
Were you still saying something, Jared? On
I just felt like did Tim Meadows feel out of place in there? Because I haven't seen it.
Not really, because like that thing's like that episode. Like I said, I kind of liked. I kind of wonder who directed it. I need to go back and look. But like, I kind of liked the episode in that it was like
Tim
It
Meadows.
was like The Office. It was like Coruscant, The Office. You know, where like a lot of it was just like basically cubicles and
Tim
people
Meadows
like.
is underrated SNL for sure. He was one of the.
I didn't know he was on SNL.
Tim
Am I saying
Meadows?
the right guys? Am I mixing them up?
Yeah, no, he was SNL. He was
Yeah, Tim Meadows.
the ladies' man, some Courvoisier.
I just
Tim
know him
Meadows-
as like the funny guy from all of the John C. Reilly movies.
Yeah, he was on SNL forever, and he just held it down.
Tim Meadows'
Sure.
character in Walk Hard, Dewey
And
Cox.
Dewey Cox, yeah.
Oh, that was
You don't want any of this shit, Dewey.
It's
a nightmare.
yeah. I don't want to get addicted. It's not addictive at all.
Well, it sounds expensive. It's the cheapest drug there is.
I don't want to get a hangover.
It makes sex even better. You don't want none of this shit. And you never paid for drugs. Not once. On that one part, he goes like, don't talk to Dewey Cox. He has to think about his whole life before he plays a concert. You know, I love that movie.
Tim Meadows was great. He's awesome.
Let's see here. Once again, here comes our based Mormon world now.
Your case with John Dehlin, in which you have no counterclaims anymore, but only his claims against you. When you take the stand, it also happened actually at the anti-stalking petition hearing that you lost. When you took the stand, you'll notice that when you were sworn in as a witness, the bailiff does not say, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is your truth? You never hear those words. They don't ask you if it's your truth. They ask you if it's the truth. That's the truth I'm interested in. The truth, not your truth, not my truth, the truth. Okay.
See, that's the thing. That
So
just apply
then
that
I
to-
said-
apply that to everything, because they have all of these fluffy, cutesy beliefs about like my truth and about like believe women and listen to people's lived experiences and stuff like that. But it's the second they're backed up against the wall, they're like, well, obviously none of those things are actually real.
Yeah, whenever it comes up, they go right to hell against it. Just-
Believe all women, and then women, like 19 women, accuse John Dehlin of shit. I don't even know what. Well, not those women, obviously. I mean, don't just believe anyone. It would be foolish to believe just anyone. And my truth. Well, obviously, you don't have your own version of the truth. There only is one truth. But
what woman would lie about this? Well, obviously, this one lies about stuff all the time and does really crazy, wild, stupid, wild things. But
yeah. The incompetent woman who is clearly hysterical.
I guess
and
it's
has
I
an
guess they're
obvious
all just
personality disorder and is quite obviously an abusive liar. What motivation would she have to lie?
I guess they're all just luxury beliefs.
And here's us, like, once again, like, this is Jen Camp, who, you know, we don't love Dehlin and all that stuff, although we always say, go have your podcast, man, whatever. We don't want to take it away from you. But it's perfectly easy for us to stop and say, hey, this Jen Camp is nuts. You know, we can look at that. I wonder if Midnight Mormons, like, if you had them review Jen Camp, what they would say, because you know that they're just so want to just hate on Dehlin. But do you think that they would have integrity about Jen Camp?
I have hope that they would, like, because she is so. It's apologizing for Jen Camp is like apologizing for Amber Heard. Because my wife asked me about the Jen Camp thing. She's like, "Oh, what are people saying in her defense?" I was like, "Well, nothing really. Like nobody. It's." You can find the odd person who's like, yeah, Amber Heard did nothing wrong or whatever, but it's real difficult. It's pretty bipartisan. Like, she's a crazy bitch.
Yeah, like John Dehlin is redeemable. Jen Camp is not.
Jen Camp is a very, very troubled person.
Steve Eliason says The Hobbit should have won some Oscars. Have you ever watched On Cinema at the Cinema, Steve? Are you familiar at all with Greg Turkington? Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
I don't know.
It's this bizarre. I mean, it's so hard to describe, and I love it so much. But it was a Tim Heidecker thing, where it's one of those surreal things he does, where it's himself but a caricature of himself. and Greg Turkington is a comedian, and Greg Turkington plays this totally straight guy, not straight comedy straight man, not sexual straight man. But he's like this film buff, and the whole ongoing joke, because they review movies, and the whole joke is that Greg Turkington just thinks Hobbit should win every Oscar every year, no matter what.
Is that what you're referring to, Steve? Steve might have been referring to that.
Maybe. But
that's
I mean, total aside. But anyway, I still haven't heard, because Jared was trying to tell us, and we kept interrupting him, about how The Hobbit made him sympathetic for apologists.
No, that's it, because it's an uphill battle. Is what
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
saying. Like,
No, I was saying,
like,
like-
trying to. I understand that, like, by almost all objective measures, The Hobbit is worse than the Lord of the Rings
Yeah.
trilogy.
It's like
I
it's like
get that.
Sisyphus before he gets to Hades. Like, you could hang out on the beach, or you could push this rock. And he's like, I'll push the rock.
Yeah,
Like, he's not
No,
even
it-
in hell yet, and he's pushing the rock.
No, so that's kind of the thing. I'm like, I have a soft spot for Mormon apologists sometimes, because I'm like, you have a hell of a job in front of you. Like, my
yeah.
advice is just, well, don't do it. But
Yeah.
if you're
It's
gonna
one thing
do
to
it,
be to be a Mormon and, like, you know, to defend your faith, okay. But when you do, like, I mean, because it's not his whole career yet, but he has made it a large part of his thing, his ego, is to be a Mormon apologist. And, like, as soon as you make it your job or your thing, boy, you are really in trouble, because then you have no way to back down. You know, like, because, like, that's the thing, is like just that. Like,
Well,
he
speaking of that,
can't back down, because he's set himself up as an authoritative voice of reason, and he's full of shit.
well, and that's the thing, is I eventually stopped trying to run apologetics for The Hobbit, because I realized it's an uphill battle. It's impossible. And I kind of just have to say, well, it's faith. Okay. It's,
Yeah.
they'll be like, why do you like The Hobbit? Like, I do. Why? Because I do. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
no,
it.
there's some things like when I was a kid, I watched a movie I like to watch from time to time, because my brother introduced it to me, my big brother, was Eric the Viking. I don't know if you ever saw that. And it's funny because, like, it's one of the few movies that Roger Ebert gave 0 stars to. And when it came out, it got, like, just excoriated. It's got Tim Robbins in it, Tim McInerney, Mickey Rourke, Eartha Kitt. It's got John Cleese. It's got an interesting cast.
Sounds good to me.
And like, I watched it in the 90s and I loved it. And I'm like, does this hold up? So I rewatched it a couple of years ago, and I'm like, God damn it! Like, it's flawed, but this is a charming little movie.
But do you also accept that it's crap, or do you
No,
insist that others
I
should
think
see the charm in it?
Well, because
Like,
the thing is, this is it.
What's something that
one
you
of the
can
things that
admit
Roger
is
Ebert
crap?
hates about it is because, like, it opens up with Tim Robbins is a Viking. He's Eric the Viking, and the opening scene is Tim Robbins and his Viking buddies pillaging an English village. And the beginning scene is Tim Robbins bursts into a house where there's a helpless woman, and he has this whole conversation with the woman about the ethics of rape. I'm laughing about it now. And then it's like, and Roger Ebert was like, you know, like in the pre-woke era, it's like, how disgusting is this? But like, I went back and watched it. I'm like, God damn it, it's funny, you know? Because the whole thing is like, Tim Robbins feels, as a Viking, he feels obligated to rape. But he's just
is it
not
a
that
show
really into
that
it. And then the other joke is that the woman is kind of like, well, are you going to get on with it? Like,
But we're trying to find something that okay. So if you think that we watched it, we would ultimately find it charming, or is there something that you got to apologize for that you kind of know if somebody's going to go watch it and be like, yeah, you're going to not like this. Like, I remember you did that for me with some weird Korean licorice or something like that. You're like, you're not going to like this, like that, and whatever the crap that stuff was.
oh,
But
that's Vietnamese. The salty sweet licorice prune.
Oh my goodness!
What
Yeah,
the fuck?
you should try it.
No, it's one of those things where it's like,
what's
like,
something
in my life I've asked
cultural
people
that
this,
you
like, they want to punch
like?
me in the face. They put it in their mouth, they spit it out, and they hate me.
But what's something cultural that you like that when you know you're giving it to somebody else, you're like, you're not gonna like this.
I'm
But
trying to think. I don't know.
and because it's crap, not because you have bad taste or something like that. But or food wise, I mean, I could do it with a lot of food because I have childish taste buds. But sometimes I wonder if like I'm only able to do the body stuff
I
because
can't think of
have
an
no
example
good
where it
taste
was
buds.
crap because with our friend, my film buddy friend from back in the day, like, he had never seen Addams Family, and I loved that movie as a kid.
No, the first one's great. The first one.
So that's things like, but that's things like, I hadn't
It's
seen the first
tight.
one since I was a kid, and then and going back and watching it 30 years later, and I watched it with him who had never seen it, and I was kind of nervous. I'm like, is this crap? You know, it's kind of like showing like children born since 2000 trying to show them the Goonies, and they're like, they have the same reaction that you had to the salty sweet licorice prune thing.
I
where they're
saw
like,
some
"What is this
people
shit?
act
How
that way
dare you?"
to Labyrinth. I've seen people act that way to
Oh,
Labyrinth.
yeah.
If you didn't see it as a kid, you don't like it. But I
But
don't know how that wouldn't be magical anytime.
I was so happy that, like, even as an adult, and he agreed, like, because I personally, and then he agreed that the first Addams Family is a gem. That's a great movie. Raul Julia's performance is
Not only that
so
shows
wonderful.
it's something different about the times too, is that there's not a waste. Watch that movie again and try to count like the wasted second. There's no wasted second in it. Everything is moving towards like a bit or a reference or a thing. And when I watched it, I was kind of like mesmerized, just like how sharp it was.
Yeah,
But
it's excellent screenplay. Wonderful Christopher Lloyd again. Christopher Lloyd's in that. The whole casting was great. Angelica Houston was great. Raul Julia stole the show. Even
Holds up
little
a
girl
million
Christina Ricci did a great job.
Yeah.
Is it the second one that has Joan Cusack?
Joan Cusack, yeah. And that one's not as good.
It's
It's
not
not
as
as sharp
good,
as the
no.
first, but there's some funny stuff in it, like the stuff.
I remember Joan Cusack. She was funny. She did.
I remember the part where he like calls Sally Jesse Raphael, and Sally Jesse Raphael is like, for the last, she's having on Colts. Sally Jesse Raphael is having a TV show that's showing Colts, and the whole crowd's like, oh my goodness. And he calls up, and she goes, for the last time, Mr. Adams, we can't tell you where they meet. You know, he wants to go join.
Troy's doing classic Raul Julia lines from that show.
Yeah. Well, aren't you a lady killer? Acquitted. I love. Yeah.
Acquitted.
I mean, anything with him in
Well,
it, like
it's like one of the
Well, I
lines from I don't know if it was the first one or the second one. I think maybe it was the first one. And like it's something that like I feel like it's my own little thing where like I've said it out loud and nobody knows what I'm referencing. But there's the scene where it's like the Halloween thing, and Cousin It shows up, and because obviously Cousin It is just like his hair and nothing else. And so he's like, what? And he's wearing a cowboy hat. And so he's like, oh, I didn't even recognize him. And Raul Julia goes, well, it is a wonderful hat. And his delivery is like that Phil Hartman delivery where he just managed to squeeze out every ounce of comedy out of every word.
Yeah,
It's
he's
so perfect.
But what's her name? Playing the wife. She does.
Angelica Houston.
She just sells it like
Angelica Houston. Yeah, she does wonderfully. That's another movie that I loved as a kid and I rewatched. It doesn't hold up the way Addams Family did, but I did like was The Witches. Do you remember The Witches?
Oh yeah, that's good.
Because that had Angelica Houston in it, and also Rowan Atkinson is in that one.
They tried to reboot it, and it was all controversial. It had Anne Hathaway in it. And it was controversial because I think because you weren't supposed to say that the bald headedness was ugly and all that sorts of stuff. It became it went through its own woke controversy. For sure. Joy says Midnight Mormons. The way they responded to Jeff Durbin, I don't think they could be fair to Dehlin either. It's just too easy. It's too much. It's catnip to them to just say, now another woman's accused Dehlin. But I think it would go a long way if they stopped and looked at that and said, okay, this Jen person's full of crap.
I think Jen Camp is probably even too difficult to defend for them to defend. Like I was pretty shocked by their Jeff Durbin thing because
Here's the thing is, like,
you guys totally believe you get planets. It's okay. Just believe it. But you believe it.
I think that in a vacuum by themselves, like Kwaku, Brad, they'd see the reality of it. Cardin, I think, is so far up his ass that he would take the catnip.
No, I think they'd see the reality of it, but then still at some point later, just when they're doing like a quick zinging of Dehlin, they'll say, accused multiple times of women on his show, right? It's like they'd be honest about it if they reviewed the whole situation, but then they'd still use it as a tagline for him at some point later. That's what I think. So we've been arguing a little bit with friend of the channel about gendery stuff. And I was thinking about it. Just today, Peter Boghossian had on Colin Wright. Colin Wright has Reality's Last Stand, which I highly recommend. But people getting married to ideas, we brought them up before. This whole thing is them reviewing. So pretty recently, I don't know if you guys saw it, Boghossian and Richard Dawkins had a conversation where Boghossian and Dawkins were saying what the crap is going on here. And Dawkins even said something like, maybe in Africa, Christianity is the better choice than Islam or something like that, or even atheism or something like that, which is kind of wild to hear Dawkins say. And but then they were talking about how wokeness is religion. Dawkins is coming right out with it, saying that privilege is like the original sin, and then saying that the trans thing is like the configuration of Christ and all that sorts of stuff. Well, this is Rationality Rules, who reviewed them. If you remember, Rationality Rules is the guy who came out against women in sports and then got shamed into this position again by Matt Dillahunty. And now he's full on buying it after. Do you remember that? We talked about it before.
I don't remember.
Oh, I've seen
the
Rationality
details.
Rules quite a bit. He got pretty woke-ish, I think. And Matt Dillahunty, if you would have told me when I first started listening to Matt Dillahunty that like one day you're gonna watch him join a religion, I'd be like, what?
Oh man, they don't got a transcript either. Maybe it's just not out long enough. But yeah, they talked about Dillahunty and stuff towards the end of this. But Rationality Rules was one of the guys who came out saying it's obvious, men shouldn't play in sports. And now here he is taking down Boghossian and Dawkins and their irrational take on transgenderism. And Colin and Boghossian, they invited them on, but they wouldn't go back on. Well, I know. So Seth, who's been on this channel, we've been discussing with him and arguing with him. And I think in good faith, he kind of buys some of a bunch of these transgender concepts and ideas, and to the point where he was saying that males can have female experiences or something. I don't know how he's saying it. But then he'd kind of go back, feminine or female experiences.
Well, so no, I pushed him on that, and I was like, what the hell do you even mean by that? Because what if like a female experience? Not all females experience it, obviously, but like most females experience menstruation. So if I tell you that I'm experiencing menstruation, and I confirm to you, I am a male. I have no uterus, no ovaries.
You got XY chromosomes. You've got a dick and balls.
Menstruation. I was like, would you sort of take my word for it? Because you're setting yourself up to be held hostage by people's stupid whims. And he was like, well, I would believe that you're probably experiencing something resembling menstruation, and I would look into into ailments that might have similar symptoms. And I was like, okay, but by doing that, you're invalidating my experience. Like by saying, oh, he's probably like feeling stomach cramps and mood swings and stuff like that. I know it can't actually be menstruation because he's a male. You're invalidating my female experience that I just said that I had. And he said, well, things that like experiences that you attach like an observable physical thing to, sure, they can be fake. And I was like, but you just told me that all experiences cannot be fake. Like he actually used those words. And I was like, I don't know, man. This is illogical to me. This all seems so simple, and my wife's getting tired of the amount of times I just go, "Fuck off and die, Socrates." That's my catchphrase now. Every time I see somebody being unnecessarily complicated over some bullshit, I say, "Fuck off and die, Socrates."
Yeah. So this is Seth. He had a debate with Jacob about atheism. So I'm just showing like who he is. And he's been on here talking about he's been on here for the Socrates Beyond Socrates reviews that we started doing and then fell off, largely because most people who get too deep into it with Vervaeke have that same sensation that Jared just described about. After a minute, like, okay, enough of this. I think Seth really liked it though, but at the same time too, some of the things we've always talked about philosophy is Nietzsche's critique. It's just a perfect place to build whatever sandcastle in your head. But
philosophy exists to mitigate the problems caused by philosophizing.
I know that Seth likes Rationality Rules a whole lot and listens to these guys, but Rationality Rules, this guy had debates with Pajau back in the day. He's had debates with Paul Vanderklay. And he looks way different. You'd probably recognize him if you saw him, like how he used to look. Now he's got a big old beard and kind of half-shaved head, but he used to look, I don't know, he had long hair and looked like a young kid.
He looked like less like Ragnar and more like Kurt Cobain.
Yeah. And this guy was being rational, talking about men playing in women's sports, and he showed up at the university or at the Atheist of Austin's campus, and he went to go say hi and introduce himself and say what's up to everybody, and he got kicked off the campus for his transphobia.
Oh no, my religion is excommunicating me. Time to change rationality.
But Paul Vanderklee pointed out that within a few days, he had a whole big change of heart. And now he's decided that, men and women are women that can be men.
It's like that great ex-Mormon like joke where they're always talking about how the Mormon church is like, we'll never give black people the priesthood. And all of a sudden they're like, well, how about that tax exempt status? And they're like, we just received a revelation. We'll never give up polygamy. Well, we'll give you statehood. It's like, revelation.
Yeah.
How strange.
So
I don't know. That's one thing that John Larson said that I think is worthy of consideration, though, because he talked about the 1978 priesthood decision with the church, and he said, like, John Larson's opinion was that the final straw that broke the camel's back was when Notre Dame refused to play BYU in football, and that was like, okay, that's too much. We're gonna have to allow blacks now.
Football especially, but like sports in general, is like the cure to racism.
Yeah.
It's just no high school football coach can remain racist.
Not like that thing about like competitive sports is the place where merit rules. That's it. Like,
or music, even like you can't
you have to be good enough. Yeah,
you can't be a music fan and be racist.
No. Well, because the thing is, merit doesn't rule in music because Linda McCartney had a job in Wings.
I'm just saying, like, you can't appreciate music without like at least acknowledging Chuck Berry.
Yeah,
not for his kidnapping, but for his music, his revolutionary guitar licks.
Yeah.
Well, so this whole episode's really good because they're going back at criticisms that Dawkins and Bogosian got from rationality rules, and they obviously just don't understand what the difference between a male and a female is. Like, they attribute all the secondary sex characteristics and the behaviors to, and that's one of the things I got into with Seth, him saying, well, I think female and feminine experiences are both valid ways of conceptualizing things. I don't. Like, it's the man or a Muppet song. Like, the man, you can be a very manly Muppet, or that Muppet, you can be a Muppet of a man, but you're still a Muppet, and the other one's still a man. And it doesn't matter about like the secondary sex characteristics. It doesn't matter about the things. It matters what the thing is. And then, of course, it's you guys who say that those secondary characteristics describe the being. So it's like you are the ones putting the stereotype onto the person instead of saying that the being can have many, many different types of experiences, but they're experiencing them as a male or as a female because that is a hard binary with their gametes.
One of the things I always complain about with this is they always try to fall back on that. Oh, you're mistaking sex and gender, and no, I'm not. I never am because I knew you were going to say that. The second I say anything, I knew you were going to say that because you're predictable. You're so boring. But
it's not just popped into my head that the left could fulfill all their desires by like just the whole petrochemical industry, replace all the men with women, and then you won't have any more greenhouse gas emissions because production will drop to almost nothing because that's really, really physically demanding work. And there you go. Just
no, but they always take those definitions and they ebb and flow. They're either a mile apart or they're nearly the same thing. And that's one of the things that Seth did was basically take female and feminine experience or gender and just those are the same thing right now. Right now they are. But just a second ago, sex and gender were totally different things because I was confusing them by saying that a male can never be a woman.
So
One of those things that makes me crazy about it is like I feel like I was really, really, really young when I realized like, well, men are men and women are women, and there's generalities to both, but some men are very feminine and some women are very masculine. Okay. Like literally just that. Okay. What's the big deal? Who gives a shit? You know? Like I think I know I told the story before when I was in high school, because I went to goofball alternative high school, and one of the teachers pulled a bunch of strings and got this special program where a Navajo lady came and taught class once a week and taught us all about Navajo shit. And I was totally into it because I love learning of all kinds of stuff. And one day we learned about how to make Navajo fry bread. And they asked for volunteers to make the bread. And my hand shot up because I like things. I like food. I like cooking. I like learning. It was all my favorite things in once. I'm like, yeah, I'll make the bread. And the teacher said, thank you for defying gender stereotypes, Felipe. And I didn't say anything, but I remember it. I mean, stuck in my memory. Like, what? Like, what are you talking? Okay, first off, almost all professional bakers are men. Like, maybe not all the baking in the world. Like the vast majority of people who bake every day are not men, but almost all professional bakers are men. But so the fuck what? Like, this doesn't hurt my brain to work this out, how this came to be. But like, I'm not defying gender roles. I want to learn to make bread. What's the big deal? You know, like I was 6'3" then. Like I was very man. And I didn't think 2 seconds about, well, should I make the bread? Will the other men look down on me if I make the bread? No, I made the fucking bread. And I enjoyed it. And I ate it. And it was good.
That's the difference between lifting the barriers and pushing people into things that they don't want to do. That's like there should be zero barriers between women and STEM fields. But
yeah, there are none.
Yeah, there are none. I'm just saying that that's the way it ought to be.
Yeah.
And now that there are no barriers, we're done. We don't have to try to convince more women to join STEM. We don't have to try to convince more men to bake fry bread, even if that were a gender stereotype.
Well, no, it's one of those things that makes me insane because, like, just in my walking around doing my Wikipedia walks, I call them walks in the Wikipedia forest. How many times that and I don't even remember how I got there, but I'm on the page about some woman who got her PhD from Yale in 1868 in the scientific field. And I want to take it and blast it out onto feminist world. Like, how did this happen? According to you and your bizarre anti-historical conspiracy theory about the patriarchy, how the hell did this woman get her fucking doctorate in a scientific field in the 19th century? According to you, it wasn't possible. According to you, she was told no. Except here she is in the Wikipedia as the discoverer of some fucking physical property that I don't remember anymore, you know?
So let me talk about this weird little concept that kind of goes in line with that in the sense of this is HP Zero Lovecraft. This is a Substack. This is a way long article, which I'm not going to get into except for to kind of summarize a little bit of it. What he's talking about, it's called Zendaya and the Art of Multiverse Maintenance. What he says or claims in this article is that all these different series, all these different shows, when they go to multiverses, which basically means now we got infinite options, right? Once we got infinite options, it always becomes the same story. And the same story is usually the character has to fight with a version of themselves. And if the version of themselves wins, all universes die. And he says, if you think about it, that's like the ultimate narcissistic viewing of everything. Is like you got to just fight with yourself, and if you don't beat yourself, the whole universes of all universes die. And it's always the same story.
Dude, I think people are gonna get sick of the multiverse thing really, really quick. I think they already are, but that's half of comic books right now. I keep getting these little YouTube shorts pushed at me that are like just like this version of Spider-Man. Like it is Spider-Man is rife with this shit. I found one that was a universe that like they took a Miles Morales, so Spider-Man. There was a universe where he was Iron Man, another one where he was Thor, another one where he's Captain America. So they get all the Miles Morales. They're like, what if all of the Avengers were just Miles Morales? And then they just have an Avengers thing where they all look like the same guy. Like it's just like doing the Avengers, but everybody looks the same and it's bland, except for Thor. Miles Morales Thor.
All the stories are the same.
He
just
graffitied his hammer, which was kind of funny.
they ultimately just need to fight with themselves, which is kind of like a substitute for an internal battle. And if they don't win, all the universes explode. They all die. It's always the thing. But one of the things he ties it into is the concept of transgenderism. That as soon as there's a million, or non-binary or whatever, as soon as there's a million options for all these different transes and all this sorts of stuff, they actually just turn in on themselves and then start reifying that these stereotypes are female and these stereotypes are male. And they actually, instead of expanding possibilities, narrow them the hell down. Multiverses narrow the hell down scripts. Transgenderism or multi whatever sorts of sexualities narrow down humans. You know, that a woman being an actual woman, a female being able to be everything, is where the diversity is, not the concept of whatever she is makes her a woman, or whatever he is makes her a man. That's the other one is restricting. The thing that you think expands possibility restricts possibility.
What's the forget the name's escaping me, the Bud Light guy.
Dylan Mulvaney?
Yes, Dylan Mulvaney. Like that's a perfect example of that, where it's like you don't have to be Dylan Mulvaney, the male actor. You can be anything you want to be. So what are you? The ditziest, most two-dimensional paper cutout stereotype of a little princess girl. You like dresses and you curl your hair and you like puppies and picnics and sunshine. And that's what you chose out of the infinite world of possibilities. You chose a stereotype that not even women want to be.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I don't know. It's they get into it in that Bogosian and Colin Wright episode, but Colin also covers it on his Realities Last Stand Substack, so people should get into that as well. But so much of it is just this kind of like wishful thinking, but it always inverts. Like it actually inverts potential being, I don't call it dishonest. Like Seth, I don't think is dishonest, but Bogosian also says in that episode, I think he was referring to James Lindsay, is like, what happened to Rationality Rules or to Matt Dillahunty and all these sorts of people? And he thinks what it ultimately is they have a super adverse fear of being called right wing in any way. That's really what it is. And then they got it. So I mentioned that because Flip brought up like they get held and locked in their positions. And now Rationality Rules is going to have to ride that one out. He's going to have to ride it out. Dillahunty's going to have to ride it out now because they're completely locked into it. Or if they go back the other way, they're a right-wing white supremacist.
Yeah. Well, I view it like that because I didn't think Seth was being dishonest. It felt like a blind spot almost because here's what it is. If I explain it in the chat like this, if somebody were to bring to me like undeniable proof that the Jews were this evil, subversive lizard people species that were trying to control the world and control my mind.
They're why Germany lost World War I.
Something like that. If they actually proved that to me and it was, I feel like I would fight tooth and nail against that. Like I'd be like, that's an evil thing to believe. Yeah. So I can't believe it, even if it's true. And so it feels kind of like that. Somebody kicking and squirming against something that they view as evil. It's evil to, deny these people's gender identity or whatever. So I can't do that no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, I've used this analogy before, but like Because, like, obviously, the Nazi conspiracy is not true. Preface: none of it's true. There's no reason to believe it. There's no evidence for it. But if what the Nazis believed about Jews was true, if it's true, then everything they did is totally justified. Now, it's not true, which is why everything they did was absolutely evil. Now, if the feminist conspiracy theory of the patriarchy is true, well, then everything they do is justified. But it's not true. So it's evil. So, like, if the queer theory conspiracy is true about cis hetero white normative, whatever it is, well, then
Yeah.
everything they do is justified. But it's not true.
Well, that's
So
that
what it is
Jonathan.
evil.
Yeah, that's the Jonathan Haidt stuff where he's always talking about how most of our beliefs are post hoc rationalizations most of the time. And you can see that, like, I see it at work when, I don't know, when somebody does something that pisses someone off. It even happened today. This guy did this thing that pissed somebody else off, and she was like, all yelling about it to me, and I was like, well, he might have had a good reason to do it. I don't know. We don't know the whole story or whatever. And she's like, well, it's not that he did it that pissed me off. It's the way that he did it. And if I say, well, he didn't have a choice because of this. Well, it's not so much the way that he did it that pissed me off as that he said he wasn't going to do it. And no matter how many of those things you take down, she'll always have something else there to sort of post hoc justify her anger toward this guy, because it's either that, or you have to confront the fact that, okay, I jumped to anger before I ought to have, which really isn't that difficult of a thing to confront once you start doing it. It just seems like it's really difficult to do.
Yeah, the one possibility that can't be considered is maybe I got it wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm the asshole in this situation.
Yeah. So one of the things that we notice with all that stuff is that they usually start trying to argue. They both argued my experience and the science, right? And I don't see any other way to view that than a type of kettle logic. It's a type of kettle logic that, like, both of your answers, that you try to use this answer, this answer, this answer. If you put the three answers together, they cancel each other out. That's the kettle logic thing. If people remember, kettle logic is a neighbor borrowed your kettle. The kettle comes back broken. The neighbor, what are the three arguments they'll say?
I didn't borrow your kettle.
I didn't borrow your kettle. There was like that when I got it.
It was broken when you gave it to me.
It was broken when you gave it to me. I didn't borrow it, and it's not broken.
It's several mutually exclusive.
The three answers, the multiple answers answer each other. They cancel each other out. So, like, if you start arguing the hard science of the trans stuff and you say, but Judith Butler would never, ever, ever accept that. It's just the phenomenology of your experience. And if you could disprove your transgenderism with something that, whoa, if it turns out the brain this, the brain that, okay, so now we have a test that could disprove it for somebody. No, nope, we are not going to go down that road. But I mean, I was even kind of surprised to see Seth kind of argue that it's experiential, like, I can't repeat exactly like how I said it off the top of my head. But he was ultimately just saying it's the experience of the person. That experience can be a female experience of the person. Like, no, it could only be a male experience, a feminine thing. Like, I could grant you that. Yeah. Or, but no, it's not a female having that experience. And it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard binary. And then rationality rules, and those guys, they pointed out that they think that it's just a linguistic construct again, that we say that there's a hard binary between a gamete and a sperm.
So this is what he said. There is a difference between belief and experience. Beliefs can be wrong. Experiences can never be wrong. If you experience pain, that is a truth that no amount of biological inquiry can debunk. Similarly, one can experience a different gender. It's not about believing they are a different gender. It's about experiencing, feeling, and being a different gender. I don't understand how it's different. That thinking, because, like, if the analogy I keep using, and I used it in this post that he was talking to, was like, look, this was a little bit our fault because we were willing to pretend to a certain degree, right? So if I'm a mother and my son comes to me and says that you can, like, I think I can fly. I think I can fly like Superman. And I say, yes, honey, you can. You definitely can. And I spend the next few months just constantly affirming his thought that he can fly like Superman, and he jumps off the roof eventually, inevitably. Then who's to blame? The delusional kid who had like probably some type of a mental illness that pushed him into thinking that, or made him vulnerable to that thought? Or was it me, the grown-up in the room?
Yeah. Like, because like that whole thing, I mean, what my mind goes to was earlier this year when I spent way more time than I want to think about with my schizophrenic friend in the full throes of psychosis. Because at one point, he threatened to murder me if I didn't bring him acetone to drink, because he told me that he could not be harmed by acetone.
Ugh.
Like, now, according to Seth, his experience is real. He's experiencing all these things, and his experience is that he is the 21st incarnation of Jesus Christ, and nothing can harm him, and he needs to drink acetone. That's his experience. No, he's wrong. He's insane. That's psychotic.
Correct.
Like, he's experiencing that. Yeah, he's definitely experiencing that, but it's not real. It's not true. It's not reality. And if I affirm that, I would kill him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've likened it a whole lot because I do think it is quite alike, and it's something that I experienced because I was one of the rare male youngsters in this world who experienced what's the word for it? Bulimia or
Anorexia?
Anorexia, yeah. At 13, 14 years old, I was one of those who got in my head, and most bodybuilders or something. I frequently said bodybuilding is just like a controlled mental illness. If you come across like anybody who's really getting crazy into it, because usually they're dysmorphic. Me, I was always just wanting to stay in shape or thin or that sort of thing, and yeah, it persists on to this day. So in some sort of way, I got on top of it the same way I think a trans kid could get on top of living a life. And it doesn't mean that whatever that sort of thing was ever went away. Obviously, it didn't. Like, look at my life. I still do that stuff like every day. But I was completely delusional. My experience at 13, 14 was delusional with how skinny I was and how fat I thought I was. And I needed adults to straighten me out for my safety and health. And they did it, and they helped.
Is this just like a difference in like how much shame people can tolerate? Because I feel like a lot of people they'll be like ashamed of their body, so they mitigate that by not eating or something. Like, but I feel like I must just be able to tolerate infinite amounts of shame, because I swear to God, I experienced all the same shame as everybody did growing up Mormon. But it didn't make me change; it just made me miserable.
Yeah. So it was not a valid experience of me at that time and frame to be experiencing fatness. Just like we started out with this, making fun of the fatties and the tubbies. Sometimes it is not a valid experience for those persons to say they are experiencing extreme health and wellness when they are not, and
Michael Jackson may have felt like a little white girl, but Michael Jackson was an adult black man.
Oh man.
But Christopher Wright says, why is experience valid for sexual attraction but not for gender? Because sexual attraction is subjective, gender is not. I just answered that question.
Sexual attraction is subjective.
I mean, because okay, how do you know what you're attracted to? Well, because you feel that way. But there's gender, what's your gender?
Yeah, well, gender is a physical thing. Like, I don't.
It's your chromosomes. Your chromosomes tell you.
The sex-gender distinction is bullshit.
Yeah,
and because
exactly.
gender is one of two things. It's either synonymous with sex or
It's magic.
a myth. You know,
Yeah.
it is. It's a
Or it's
metaphysical thing.
very, very, very highly correlated, tied to things that
Yeah.
don't get that correlated in nature.
or it's gender roles, because a lot of times when I ask people what is gender, they'll tell me, well, it's the way that you present yourself. No, that's gender roles. Okay, like there's gender norms, like things like wearing a skirt. That's
But that's all been
for women.
redefinition. That's all been redefinition since they decided to make it a political or an ideological divide 30, 40, 50 years ago.
But they keep describing something that surrounds a concept. The concept it surrounds is gender, but gender isn't real. It's not a real concept. So they're vaguely trying to describe it by describing the things that surround it, like gender roles and gender presentation and shit like that, gender preferences, just dumb shit like that. Oh, it's like wearing a skirt, or oh, it's like being more nurturing, or whatever. No, you're describing.
Most engineers are
traditional roles.
men. Most engineers are men. Marty is an engineer. Marty is a man.
Yeah.
It's exactly that stupid. It's
Mhm.
exactly that stupid.
But that's the point of it too, is that people keep talking about like it's a spectrum, like it goes this way and this way on one plane, but it's not one plane. It's two planes, and I think that's why it's like easier to understand it as the Muppets. You know, like it's two planes. It's not one spectrum. So this
Close to 9/11 to be talking about two planes.
Yeah. This plane, this Muppet can be very manly or very Muppety, and this man can be very Muppety or very manly. They are not on the same plane. They are two different things that we're evaluating there, and trying to like put
this
them
thing
on
that makes me crazy about the modern, like the whole woke thing is because, like, when I was a little kid, they hammered it into us that like it's okay to be a girly man or a manly woman. That's fine. And like my little kid brain went, yeah, okay, I get it. That's fine. I'll make the bread. You know, I got no problem.
I'll do the
And now
woman's
fast
work.
forward to the future, it's like, oh no, it's this whole other thing. Like, and I'm like, no. I learned this in kindergarten. There's
They both have the
okay to
same
be who you are.
so they have the same response but different prescriptions. So if you go like, if let's say I have a hyper conservative actually bigoted dad and a hyper woke mom, and I come up and I don't know, I'm wearing high heels or a skirt or something, or I want to play with a Barbie or something like that. They both say the same thing. They'd both be like, my dad would be like, that's woman shit. And then he'd try to beat it out of me. And then my mom would be like, that's woman shit. And then she'd put me on hormones. And as terrible as it is getting the woman beaten out of you, I think I'd prefer it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, at least Ex-Mormon World's getting all based now for us. Base.
It's all coming
For the
around.
moment.
Do you want to look at more talking about sneaky effers or jokes or weird stuff from TikTok, or call it good? Or do we want to hear people talk about banned porn on the Senate floor?
That was funny.
There's a tough fucking hill to climb as an
that thing was
apologist,
so
is
funny 'cause
trying to
yeah.
explain why your kid needs to have a book that depicts a blowjob in it.
If I took that book to work and said to my coworker, "Hey, look at this image," I would be rightly fired for showing sexually explicit material to my coworker at work.
Well, anytime people start whining on Facebook or whatever about they're banning books, I go, I will post it right here and watch you guys kick me off of this thread. Because I have the picture saved. And
let's take two books that have been much discussed.
I'll probably get this kicked off YouTube.
So, but it had to be this guy too reading it.
The
with
first
his
one
hairdo
is
and his
called
accent.
All Boys Aren't Blue. And I will quote from it. I put some lube on and got him on his knees.
This is the Senate. This is being read.
And I
into-
began to slide into him from behind. I pulled out of him and kissed him while he masturbated. He asked me to turn over while he slipped a condom on himself. This was my ass, and I was struggling to imagine someone inside me. He got on top and slowly inserted himself into me. It was the worst pain I think I have ever felt in my life. Eventually, I felt a mix of pleasure with the pain. Close quote. All boys aren't blue.
That's appropriate.
The second is
This is the
another
Senate floor.
much discussed book. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's called Genderqueer. Okay.
This guy he's reading it to like took a picture and a selfie with genderqueer on it, so you know he knows it.
Read an excerpt from that. Quote, I got a new strap-on harness today. I can't wait to put it on you. It will fit my favorite dildo perfectly. You're going to look so hot. I can't wait to have your cock in my mouth. I'm going to give you the blowjob of your life. Then I want you inside of me. End quote. Now, Mr. Secretary, what are you asking us to do? Are you suggesting that only librarians should decide whether the two books that I just referenced should be available to kids? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay. Tell me what you're saying.
Well, first of all, there's this.
Don't give me a speech. Tell me what you're asking me to do.
With all due respect, Senator, and the words you spoke are disturbing, especially coming out of your mouth is very disturbing. But what I would also tell you that
I believe
we're
it
not
was
advocating
coming
for
into
kids
my
to
mouth,
report to
Senator.
Senator Booker's.
What?
Phrasing.
You didn't say anything. Maybe it wasn't right below it, but
Are you advocating for?
We are advocating for parents, random parents, not to have the ability, under the guise of keeping kids safe, to try and challenge the world view of every single manner on these issues.
You're getting conceptual.
I'm not getting conceptual. I'm saying
This is
that
a bullshit answer.
This dude, you see him like look down for a second, he's like, what the fuck do I say?
No, he knows he's caught. He
How do
knows
I-
he's.
How do I
he's
try
in
to
a bind.
explain? How do I try to explain to this guy that we should put
Like,
porn
he's
in the
got-
hands of preschoolers?
There's a direct fork in the road that this guy's presented with now. Do I cop to it and go, you know what, this is bullshit, or do I double down on the lie? And we saw him double down.
he has to double down. He can't not double down. The
Yeah.
same thing you said earlier. The people get all the way into it and they can't back off of it. That's one of the things I brought up and I was trying to think about forever ago. It's even true with like apologists and the Midnight Mormons and stuff. Is like when can you give an off ramp to people? Because you got to give like they've made such fools of themselves that how are they going to be able to get off that freeway?
Yeah.
You know, and you kind of have to think about it. Like what? Can you do?
Here's the
Like,
off ramp. Don't talk to children in public schools about dildos. Just that.
Feels pretty easy.
Yeah, like there's your off ramp is sexuality is a personal thing. What you do in your bedroom is nobody's business, including and nobody includes kindergartners in public school. They
Yeah, but what
they
I
are
mean
part
by
of
that-
nobody. When we say what you do in your bedroom is nobody's business, kindergartners in public schools is part of nobody. They're
Oh
nobody.
God, kids! My boyfriend was really railing my ass last night. I can barely walk.
No, that's it. Like when you bring that up, that's Mr. Garrison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, is the South Park thing where, like, you know, like the kids go home and like, you know, we're disturbed because our teacher is really gay, and the parents are like, "Hey, we thought we taught you to do this stuff," and they have no idea what Mr. Garrison is actually doing. You know.
Yeah, he's trying to do things that would obviously get him fired. Like there's no way they won't fire me for this.
Yeah.
Should probably arrest me.
Instead, they throw him an awards gala and give him a bravery award. Like, again, about comedy being a minimum of 10 years ahead of everything. Oh, the Mexican alien. The thing you said, Jared, of who did that parody of the it turns
ET?
out it's a piñata.
Oh yeah, I don't
Was
know.
that
It was-
Babylon B?
It
Who
had
did
to have
that?
been,
I
right?
think
I
it's
don't know.
That was
Babylon B, yeah.
brilliant. That was perfect.
Yeah. Let me see here if I can. Oh, what's her name was doing some more malesy females on the into the church community of Christ stuff, getting booted out of
geez.
it. Yeah,
Ah,
let's see
creepy
here.
stuff.
Let's see. I don't know if
Have you got more stuff?
typical
Are you
to
doing
end
more
sharing the memes and calls it goods stuff. Some quick memes and we'll call it goods.
Well, so because what I would bringing back our conversation from earlier, because it raised a question in my head for people to think about. What is the sadder ending to a career? Raul Julia's final appearance in movies was in the Street Fighter movie, or Gene Kelly's final appearance was Xanadu?
Wasn't Orson Welles' last movie kind of crap too?
What
I
was
like
I don't know what his last
Xanadu.
movie was. The
Gene
last
Wilder was in Xanadu.
The last 15 minutes of Xanadu is incredible, but the rest of it, okay, the first 5 minutes and the last 15 minutes of Xanadu are worth watching.
What's her
None of the
name?
rest of it
That's
is.
the I did not find
Olivia
her attractive.
Newton-John.
I did not find her attractive in the Grease stuff, but I found her attractive in Xanadu.
No, the same guy that I was talking about, that showing him Adam's Family. Like we watched Xanadu together, and there was a summer where we watched the last 15 minutes of Xanadu at least 100 times.
I'd
in
watch it
one
right
summer.
now if I could. We'd probably get banned off.
And he talked about with Olivia Newton-John, we call it the impossible smile. There's one spot where she's singing and smiling, and we call it the impossible smile. Where it's like, how did you do that, Olivia Newton-John?
Yeah.
But Gene Kelly was in that movie, his last movie.
I didn't
was
know he was in
shitty
there. I
roller skate.
forgot about that.
Yes.
I don't know. There's got to be worse final movies.
Well, okay. Here's the thing: we are on the cusp of seeing some of the saddest last movies ever, because they only release sad movies now. Like the only movies that are coming out suck ass. So somebody's last movie, some classic actor's last movie, is going to be like the second.
Oh, Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro is for sure going to pull off the worst. I bet.
You think so?
That's the thing that made me sad about Christopher Lloyd in Star Wars, in Disney Star Wars, because he's like 85.
Yeah.
He's not. He can't have too much left in him.
That barely counts, though. Like he was in Nobody, and he was good in that.
I never saw that. I heard that was really good.
What was that one?
Nobody. It's like
yeah, I remember. Yeah,
Bob Odenkirk's John
It's
Wick.
good. Yeah,
Bob Odenkirk might have a record for like guy who most overshot what you'd expect from him.
Oh
yeah,
he was a sketch comedian for like 25 years, and then turned into one of the greatest dramatic actors of his generation.
I'd say
I put Chris Pratt in that. Like, how did he become like the leading man?
Yeah,
in Hollywood?
but he's not a great, like, Chris Pratt is what I call like, okay, like I've had this gripe, not gripe.
He's a likable person, and it translates well to the big screen. I think.
But now he's like A-list actor. Of
That's what I said. Like for like a long time now, I've realized there's a distinction between actor and screen personality.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like Patrick Stewart, actor, Keanu Reeves, screen personality. It's fine. Keanu Reeves is awesome. We all love him, and he always does a great job. But Keanu Reeves is not a great actor.
Oh, God,
he's a
no.
great screen personality. Ian McKellen is a great actor. Gary Oldman is a great actor. What's her name? Escapes me now. We were just gushing about her at work. Jessica Lange. Jessica Lange is a phenomenal actor. But then there are personalities. Chris Pratt is a personality, not an actor.
I'd say Bryan
But
Cranston
even-
might go on that list.
But even him going from a personality on Parks and Rec to leading actor, like, you know, that, like, not actor, but like leading action man.
Yeah.
is-
No, you're right. It's
But he does basically always play the same guy. He's big,
Yeah.
likable guy. Whereas like a guy like Gary Oldman is a guy who like you.
I
There
saw
are
Daniel.
performances he does where you don't realize it's him until the end, and you see the credits, and you're like, "Oh, that was Gary Oldman."
That was one of my favorite tweets. Was like, you're on your deathbed, you say your final goodbyes to your family, and then the curtain draws, and you realize you were Gary Oldman the entire time. That's how good of an actor he is.
Who's Toshiro Mifune? Who's
Oh, he's one of my favorites ever. Although Toshiro Mifune I like, but he always does kind of play a Toshiro Mifune type.
And Harry and the Henderson. But Harry and the Hendersons was good, man.
You remember Toshiro Mifune because he was the wealthy shoe company executive in.
Oh, I know, right?
High and
He is.
Low.
I just watched that recently again.
Oh, did you watch it again?
Yeah.
So great. I haven't watched it since I watched it with you. I want to see it again.
I'd say Vince Vaughn. He shocks me because I grew up only seeing him in like dorky comedies where he always
When he
played
started
Vince
going
Vaughn.
serious.
But then I watched Brawl in Cell Block 99, and I was like,
saw that.
God, it's the same guy that did.
He's an
Bone
action
Tomahawk.
guy. Yeah, he becomes an action
And
guy.
Vince Vaughn did great in that.
And
movie.
he's good in Dragged Across Concrete too, although he's not like a superhero in that like he is in Cell Block 99. But he started doing other serious stuff too.
Huh.
Daniel Day-Lewis was. What was his last movie? It was about some sort of seamster, right?
Well, he
Somebody
did that
who,
bullshit
did
I'm
clothing.
retired thing, even though I'm not old. I'm
Oh,
retiring.
wait, speaking of, was
he
Christopher
hasn't
Lee's
done
last
anything
movie
else.
The Hobbit?
I don't know. Like he seems to have been totally serious. Like I'm done acting.
Him and Gene Hackman. I mean, he never did anything else again, and just said, "I'm done. I'm out." And, but his last movie was about a guy who was made clothing or something like that.
Wait, Orson Welles' last credit was 2018. How the hell does that work?
But I
and
thought
released posthumously.
Orson Welles' last movie was the Transformer cartoon.
Don Quixote.
Oh, he was in that?
According to this, he's in Don Quixote. When did Orson Welles die?
They probably just put his likeness in it. But I heard his last movie was that Transformers movie.
Uncompleted performance. Jeez, he worked a lot. Oh, the French. Oh, the Transformers movie, Voice, recorded in 1985, released posthumously.
I never saw the Phantom Thread. I mean, I'd be interested in seeing it. What was I just tried to watch a couple John Wayne movies. What was his last one? But
Oh, geez, I don't know.
there's somebody we're forgetting that it was probably like a whopper of a dumper of in that Star Wars Ahsoka dude, that one dude in it, he died. The guy who's the bad guy.
Yeah,
Oh yeah. I still need to watch his movie. What was that? God, he released a really good action movie, I've heard.
He's great in that HBO Rome theme. And
yeah, I looked up a list of the worst actors' last movies, and one of the first ones is Raul Julia in Street Fighter.
I've never actually watched that movie, but I'm sure it's terrible. I've actually watched little documentaries on it, and I've never seen it. But supposedly he did it. It's also a very sweet thing because he knew he was dying when he started taking it, and he took it because his kids wanted him to, and he wanted to be remembered by his kids. So
It's hard to fault a guy for that. I mean, like, I don't know. One thing is like, I don't fault actors for taking work. You know, well, I mean, call back.
Sometimes
that
I do.
episode of Louis. There's that episode of Louis when is it Joan Collins? Who was it that the legendary old female comedian? And like, because the thing is that like Louis takes a gig at some something.
Rivers.
And Joan Rivers, and she's like, "You're working. You should be happy to work." Like, so that I get. Like, I think was it Malcolm McDowell. Like, who's, I guess he famously said, because Malcolm McDowell is an interesting actor because he has worked nonstop and he has been in a lot of terrible stuff. and then he's been in a little bit of really, really good stuff.
Some of the
But
best
there's a thing
things.
that he said that supposedly Malcolm McDowell said that the way he decides whether or not to take a job is script, money, location. If he likes 2 out of 3, he takes the job.
Oh, Ray Liotta was just in Cocaine
And
Bear.
Cocaine Bear. Yeah, I was just reading that.
Oh, Ray Liotta was in that?
Yeah,
I like that.
that's his
I like that
last
thing though. Like he
movie.
says, the 2 out of 3 thing, like script, location, money. And then 2 out of 3. So like, good script, good location, no money, take the job. Good location, bad
funny.
script, good money, take the job. Like, and either
That's
way, you're like,
triage,
okay,
man. That's how
yeah.
you do triage. You are majorly cutting into me and Jared's Married at First Sight marathon. What is Married at First Sight?
Oh, it's a really, really, really shitty reality show that we'll skip.
No. Have you watched any of those?
Literally,
like,
what it sounds like. It's where they get matched up by supposed experts.
Oh my
and,
goodness.
They get married. Like as they meet, they get married, and
Well,
it always turns out terribly.
I'm gonna give you some cutesy thing for you and Jared to do, and then we'll call it good. Try this.
No volume.
How not? Come on, like why did it do that? And there's no reason for their. Is that the TikTok thing?
Are you gonna try to make me do some gay TikTok thing?
Yeah.
Do the cringiest, most
Hear it?
thing ever.
Yeah.
Called the love surge, and we do this when one of us has like so much love in our limbs that we can't contain it.
The people on the left are making fun of it.
I
But
feel like we're gonna explode. So Sean is having a love surge right now, and he's gonna wrap around me and shake with the electricity of love until I catch it too and start shaking, and then you explode with a love surge.
Hey, Sean. In Minecraft, of course, kill yourself.
So of course it was so cringy. All sorts of people on TikTok started copying it, making fun of it.
That's awful.
Yeah.
You guys like watching good, terrible stuff? Have you
Oh
ever
yes,
seen-
we do.
Because Degrassi: The Next Generation. That show, when that show came out in like the early 2000s, I had a friend that was really, really into it. And I was like, and I gave him so much shit. And then it's like, until I finally sat down and watched with him, and I'm like, okay, let's watch the next one. And then I ended up getting obsessed with it. Even though the whole time I'm like, this show is such shit. What happens next?
So my confession, and I don't like it, but I've also watched it interested, is I watched the most recent Sex and the City series, the 2 seasons of it. And it's called And Just Like That, and it is woke as shit.
Yeah, I watched the part where Cynthia Nixon gets like chewed out by.
I've watched all of it.
I've seen 0 Sex in the City of any time, anywhere.
I watched it when I was a kid because I just saw the name sex in it, so I thought I was gonna have boobs, and I was very disappointed.
One of the things
for a long time, I was like, "They're coming. The boobs are coming. I know it."
they're in
I was
there.
like,
They're in
"Sick."
there. They're just all the older lady. What's her name? Samantha or whatever. But
Old lady.
that show is a little interesting because it's still written by kind of like a little bit classically liberal gays, but they're still trying to be woke. And it's interesting because it's woke as crap, but you see them still trying to craft actual stories around the absolute wokeness. And it's just interesting seeing people try to do it. And there's also some scenes in it where like an extremely gay guy is the voice of normal people about trans stuff. So he'll be like, I'll just shut up and stop telling her about her pronouns and all that sort of stuff. And then you're like, well, this guy's based, and all that sort of deal. And it's always funny, but it's crap. It's absolute shit. It is dog shit. And I watched all of it. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. I've never watched the old or the new Man from U.N.C.L.E. And I've always like seen that name and always been like, the name of it makes me not want to watch it.
This guy's saying John Candy and Canadian Bacon, but I've never seen it.
I never saw that one. I haven't seen enough John Candy. I mean, I've seen some of the typicals like Uncle Buck.
Yeah, I've seen Uncle Buck and Spaceballs. That's about it.
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Man.
Yeah, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Pretty.
And
classic.
he was in Spaceballs. He said, "What? I don't forget what else, but I mean, yeah,
Spaceballs.
Good Good crap. Well, like I said, I watched Gone with the Wind, and that thing tripped me the hell out. I had no idea that was the story. I had no idea that was the ending.
I still have no idea what any of it is.
The
I need to
whole
watch
thing got kind of like it's like modern feminism. Strangely enough, the lady gets married 3 different times. The love story that I always thought was just kind of like a run-of-the-mill love story of this guy saving her during war times or something like that. She treats him like a complete simp, and she's always been in love with like what the red pill community will call like the alpha widow, which is just like the first guy that she ever loved who was a big time alpha. She's just in love with him the whole entire time and never ever drops it for Clark Gable, the romantic super dude who saves her lives all over. And she just can't drop it. Even years after being married to him, she just can't drop the original alpha that she loved. Although I guess it's an interesting concept of, if you think of it symbolically, and it's like the South can't give up their old thing that they loved for like some new opportunity of,
What's the thing that's gone, and what is the wind that it goes in?
The old South is what's gone. The old South, the old plantation South, the old beautiful, sweet stuff. And you can take that woman's inability to move on with other men as the South not being able to drop the South's not able to drop their old romanticized version of the plantation and all that sort of stuff. But taking it just as relationships and all that sorts of stuff right off the bat, like looking at it, you're like, holy crap, this is like 1939. This is like feminist stuff. This is like current day feminist stuff for real. Like she does, as soon as she has a baby, she says, I don't want babies and I didn't want that baby. And there's all sorts of stuff like that. And
whoa, I gotta check that out.
Yeah, I couldn't believe
4 hours long.
It's only 4 hours.
Is that all?
That's it. But all those old movies mesmerize me, man. They mesmerize me, and they wouldn't have mesmerized me in the 90s. But now, and they for sure wouldn't have. And it's because now when I see any sort of shot where there's 1,000 extras in it, my head explodes. When I see any shot that there's 20 horses in it, or 40 horses in it, or 50 horses in it, my head explodes. Like they would never do that nowadays. It's all CGI, and you can see that nothing's real nowadays. And so like these big, huge, anytime there's like a big, huge vista or multiple extras or a lot of animals, like to me, it's like 8 billion times the mesmerizing thing that CGI ever became. It's like I live in opposite land of that. The thing that was supposed to make
we watched Skyscraper a couple weeks back, and that was like one of the we were shocked by the amount of practical effects in Skyscraper.
Well, I watched Cleopatra
I have a personal story
too.
of how practical they were. Is that my dad was an extra on Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, because it was shot in southern Utah, and my dad was a theater student at the old Dixie College back then, and they did a call for extras, and they called my dad in, and they said, do you know how to ride a horse? And my dad lied and said yes, because he wanted to be in the movie. And the first thing he did, like my dad had never ridden a horse, but the first thing they did is he was in the posse scene. Like if you remember, there's the scene where they all go riding out at night holding torches. And so like that, my dad tells a story about how like they put him on a horse, they gave him a lit torch, and they say ride. And that was the first time my dad was on a horse, was in that movie.
You want to know what's
out?
You're about to start seeing a lot less extras in movies anyway, because once the SAG-AFTRA strike is over, they're going to have to give each and every one of them full health care coverage and pensions for being in
movies,
like seconds of a movie.
I watched Cromwell. Have you ever heard of Cromwell?
No.
Oliver
No,
Cromwell?
and that's because it's about Oliver Cromwell, and there was a movie with Richard Harris in it, and you haven't heard of it because it's just not famous. And you're like, this unfamous movie, I watch it, and 20,000 extras must have worked on that. And I go like, holy crap, this nothing movie has just such amazing extra scenes and all these sorts of fighting and all this sorts of stuff in it. And it's really not that great of a movie overall, but just I get mesmerized by the amount of people and stuff. And Cleopatra was the same way. There's all these scenes of like parades and all this sort of stuff, and I can't believe the parades they put together for it and the huge sets. It's just mind blowing. And then now I watch stuff nowadays, and I can't like unsee the boring old CGI.
Mike Stacklasa, Mr. Plinkett, like he really laid it out with his Phantom Menace reviews or the Star Wars prequels reviews, and he talks about that, how like it's all green screen. It's like, and you can just tell that these actors are walking on a green screen and they're not interacting with anything. It's just so obvious. Like there's just there's nothing there. And there's even cuts in a clip of Ewan McGregor saying like, you're reacting to a guy that isn't there, and you're supposed to be reacting to expressions that you're not seeing, and it's a nightmare. Like he uses that word, it's a nightmare, and it's just funny because like it's terrible. You can tell how bad like it comes out on the screen that the actors don't know what they're reacting to.
Yeah, I need to check out Lawrence of Arabia and Ben-Hur. I haven't even watched those. But part of the thing is like what I'm saying is with the Gone with the Wind, is that even if it's long and a little bit boring, but just like now you'd be way more mesmerized with it than you were in I wouldn't have cared in 1990 because it wouldn't have been a spectacle to see that in 1990. And if the 1990s stayed the same, I might have never cared because it's just people doing stuff. But now it's like, what is this? And just seeing it and seeing the people talk and seeing people interact like that, it melts my brain, which I guess is one of the nice things that you can return to appreciating things like that after we've been just fed barf for all this time. But
I mean that it is absolutely the case though. It's like because like the Transformers movies, totally forgettable, forgettable.
Except
so I'm Indiana Jones. Like when I was a kid, I was like, I can't believe that they built these whole sets. And I was a grown up when I learned like, oh, that was miniatures.
I don't think you've seen Transformers 4.
Oh.
Because that one is not forgettable. It's bizarre.
Honestly, the only thing I remember about the Transformers movies, the only thing that sticks out in my mind that I can recall at a moment is how awful Megan Fox is.
Oh, yeah.
Just how terrible her performance is.
But that's one of the things, like watching Gone with the Wind too, like I highly recommend
Gone with the Wind 2. They made a sequel.
Yeah, but if you watch it, there's so much complexity in that lady, and I'm like, I thought women weren't complex in 1939. And
they had no options. The patriarchy beat them down and made them into.
And the society shows itself to be extremely gynocentric. Wait a minute, I thought society was just all about men in 1939, and of course they're showing a time of 70 years earlier, not their current time. And I'm like, what is all this? But I don't know. It's such a I watch it because I think it kind of melts your brain about what the world actually was or wasn't this whole entire time. And the visuals will blow you away now. They wouldn't have blown you away, but they'll blow you away now. So anyway, Cleopatra was the same. So
no, that's so like I mean,
time to go
on forever. But to bring up, we referenced Kurosawa because Rashomon. There's a million stories about how crazy Kurosawa was about filmmaking, but one of my favorites is that when he was shooting Rashomon, he drove the studio crazy because he just kept coming up with excuses. Like he just wasted like thousands upon thousands of feet of film shooting bullshit, just dragging it out because he was waiting for the right rainy day. Because the beginning and ending of Rashomon are bookended by the people taking refuge under the Rashomon, the gate, from the rain. And he dragged out the production for weeks until he got the rainy day that was right. Because like nowadays, like, oh, just we'll CGI that rain. But in Rashomon, like, no, that was the fucking rain coming out of the sky. And those scenes are memorable. Like I remember Rashomon, I don't remember Transformers.
Yeah, it's worth watching because it's one of the first, like Gone with the Wind is one of the first color shows ever, and they have all these like shots and scenes of like sunset and fading away from sunset. They'll kind of blow your mind if you're thinking about like all the stuff they put into that to make it like a true classic. So anyway, everything's based now, everything's saved, it's done. So that's the final podcast.
We did it.
Ron Dehlin and RFM are taking it from here. Thanks for chilling, everybody.
All right. I'm going to try to watch Gone with the Wind by next week.
Do it.
See you.
Do it.
Ian McDermott